Right, let's get started. Welcome everybody to this afternoon's Strategic Planning Committee. First off, we could just remind you to either switch your phones off or put them on silent, please. Item 2, minutes of the previous meeting. Can we agree those as a correct record? Oh, yeah. Where are we? Yeah, it's printed. Yeah. Minutes of the previous meeting, we all right? Correct record? Yeah, thank you. Interests lobbying. We'll start with Councillor Kane. No. Councillor Patterson? No, Chair. Councillor Pinnock? No, Chair. Councillor Firth? Councillor Hammer? No, and me? None. Admission of the public. This is a meeting done in public. It is webcast as well. Number 5, deputations and petitions.
Number 6, Chair.
Thank you. Number 6, public questions.
We have one question from Councillor Patrick. You want to come forward to ask your question, please?
Thank you, Chair. Hull Valley South Ward councillors had a meeting yesterday with Yorkshire Water following a number of raw sewage leaks from sewage pipelines in the new Mill Thongs Bridge area, one of which is believed to be related to the new Jones Homes development at Tenterhill, with sewage leaking onto Stonybank Lane at Kirklees. We are concerned that the Victorian sewage system cannot take the volumes of sewage produced by all the new houses being built, be that single dwellings or large housing developments. We asked Yorkshire Water why they did not always comment on planning applications. They told us they are not always consulted. So my question is, does Kirklees Planning always consult Yorkshire Water about applications for new dwellings, and if not, when do we consult them?
Thank you for your questions. In terms of the process for consulting on planning applications, it does depend on the scale of applications, the locations, so there isn't necessarily a consistent, you can consult on all new dwellings. In terms of the process, I'm happy to take the question away and email you a response so that you've got our procedure on when we do consult on planning applications. Is that, which I can do in the next week.
Yes, that would be good, but if you could also give me an indication, it would be nice to get an indication of, say, all the planning applications for 5 or more dwellings in Hull Valley South in the last 3 years. It'd be nice to know how many of those Yorkshire Water were consulted on.
Yeah, that's fine, Councillor. We can get that information to you.
No, the point is that Mr. Franklin has just said he will email material about what sort of applications are consulted upon. I think it would be helpful for everybody else to know that, not in relation to Hull Valley South, but in general. Thank you.
Happy to do that, and then. So if I answer Councillor Patrick's specific question and then give you, all the members, the process by when we do and don't consult with Yorkshire Water, is that okay?
Chair, I was going to say that, but actually in response to that, can I just say that not just members of the planning committee, every member of the council should get that information, because everybody has particular issues with within their own area, so it's I think it should be shared with everyone. Thank you.
Right, item 7. Right, this was a site visit at Blackmore Foot Road this morning, which we got into and just about got out. Next site visit, Epworth Road, New Mill. We then went to another site visit at Thongs Bridge, which was Stonybank Lane. And we also finished off down at the John Smith Stadium. Next item 11, these are local planning authority appeals. I don't know if Paul.
Do you want to come in, David, first?
Can do. Through you, Chair. Thank you. This appeal to Reports Committee is in respect of 2 full applications for planning permission at Rumble Road in Dewsbury for the erection of 149 dwellings with associated car parking, access, landscaping, public open space and drainage. There was Appeal A and Appeal B. Appeal A was against non-determination and Appeal B against the refusal of planning permission. The only difference in the proposals was that the layout in Appeal B incorporated a raw water main and easement. The planning applications were accompanied by Section 106 agreements that included 30 affordable units and financial contributions towards education, footpath improvements, provision of metro cards, improvements to local parks and recreational grounds, and specific improvements to Bywell Rec and traffic calming measures on Rumble Road. The inspector identified the main issue in both appeals as the effect of the proposal on the provision of urban green space in Dewsbury East Ward. The inspector found that the site was not particularly attractive as a recreational route. He also found that the recreational role was limited to providing an open setting for houses and the public rights of way. Little or no visibility of the appeals site in the wider area. Its value in terms of sense of openness and visual relief beyond its immediate context was limited. The inspector found that the proposal would undermine the purpose of UDP Policy D3 and would also harm the visual amenity of some local residents, and currently open views would be replaced by built form. In concluding, the inspector found that conflict against the development plan was outweighed by material planning considerations, the main one being the provision of 149 dwellings to addressing the shortfall in local housing land supply. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. This is in my ward, and I have to say that the community around there are extremely angry about the way that the conclusion was brought by the inspector. In particular, I think you touched upon one thing about it having no recreational value. That piece of land is what used to be called a little oasis in what is a greatly sort of built-up area, and they are still quite a little bit bitter about it. Although we do take into consideration the contributions that will be made through the application. Can I just ask that is the 106 is there a universal undertaking on the monies to the actual leisure side of it?
The contribution in terms of the specified community benefit is specific to the Bywell Park scheme. Then there's the delivery of the public open space on site and the contribution again for equipped children's play in addition to that, which isn't as specified, but the specified community benefit was at Bywell's Park Council.
Right. All I'm trying to say is that obviously there's a lot of bitterness around about what's actually come from there, and the inspector, the way that they've overridden the local views of people, and I think there was 12 to 16 people actually attended on the day, and were quite angry at obviously at the way that it was dealt with. But that's by the by. The only problem I've got is that when it comes for a full application, that we start looking at the possibility of losing that fund through viability. Now, are you saying that is not the case?
Yeah, my understanding, following a discussion with Persimmon, is that they are now moving to conclude on the land sale, and that they are not looking to revisit the viability at all across the site. That's my understanding.
That's fine, but can I just say that can I just make it noted that the community up there are still quite angry about this, and that, you know, the whole fact that the planning inspector didn't take into consideration what local knowledge and their feelings, and were a little bit angry about the way that they said that there was no recreational value. Thank you.
Right, move on to the planning applications, and we'll go to page 35. This is Dubroyd Mills, Epworth Road, New Mill, Home Faith. Have you?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm Matthew Woodward, Senior Planning Officer. So the proposal comprises a hybrid application. That is to say that it's split into two constituent parts but forms one of the same scheme. As detailed in the update, the development description now reads an outline. It's a proposal for an outline application for up to 75 dwellings, and as you'll see from the slide above, the 75 dwellings will be positioned within the area that's hatched in light blue, although you can only just make that out. So that is the outline element, and the full application relates to the bit that's hatched in green, and that comprises a change of use of the existing mill building to a mix of 27 apartments and 650 square metres of B1 office space. So the site itself is located between Hepworth and Jackson Bridge and approximately 7.5 miles south of Huddersfield. It's generally split in terms of character. On the northernmost portion of the site, there are a range of mill buildings dating from approximately 1830, and it's, if you draw a line roughly where the mouse pointer is, everything to the right of that lies within the green belt. The remainder of the site, again as denoted by the mouse pointer, is classed as provisional open land, pole land in the unitary development plan, and there is a small rectangle of land at the bottom corner of the site, which is a housing allocation. In the emerging local plan, the site is allocated as mixed use. Now, this carries considerable weight, but it isn't the current allocation of the site. Now, the slide above shows the extent of the existing buildings within the site. As you can see, it covers quite a large area, details of which are in the report in terms of the floor space that the existing buildings cover. The land generally rises from the existing mill buildings to the provisional open land, which lies at a higher level, closest to the houses off Kemp's Way. The proposal would involve the demolition of a large proportion of the existing buildings, again as shown on the plan. The purple building there is the one that will be retained, as we saw on our site visit. The bits in green are the elements that will be demolished. The application is accompanied by a master plan. So the change of use element is the bit that's fixed. That's the full application. The remainder of the scheme is in outline form. Therefore, this plan is in indicative form, but it just shows how the site might be pursued should planning permission be granted and should a reserved matters submission come in. So in essence, there's a fairly large proportion, I think 30-odd dwellings on the former Greenbelt, on the Greenbelt allocation. The remainder of the houses will be positioned on the pole allocation and within the housing allocation. The mill pond area, as you can see from the plan, that will be retained and will be subject to a management plan and potential that would contribute towards a public open space requirement as part of the reserved matters. The application is also accompanied by a phasing plan, and this generally shows that the demolition of the existing buildings would take place first, the road infrastructure will be put in second, and then the site would then be developed in phases. Of course, that is subject to change, but it's just an indication as to how the site could be progressed going forwards. So as you saw from our site visit, the existing building is in a state of dilapidation. It's been neglected for a number of years. The application has been accompanied by a structural survey, and it does demonstrate that the building in question is capable of conversion with relatively minimal works, although a condition is recommended requiring full details of the conversion to be submitted. So the change of use element itself, so the change of use of the building there in purple, as I've said, that's 650 square metres of office space, 27 apartments and an associated area of parking. And you'll note from the update that that's been amended from the original submission. The original submission included B1 light industry and a restaurant, coffee shop type use as well, but that's been omitted mainly due to potential issues with parking and manoeuvrability within the site. So just to give a bit of detail, this is the bit that's fixed again, the full application element. So you can see the parking proposed and how it's laid out. A total of 78 car parking spaces to accommodate the office and residential elements. That's 31 spaces for the office and 47 spaces for residential, which is considered to meet the council's parking standards. An indicative floor plan of the existing building, but just to highlight that all the units would be at least two bedrooms, and there is sufficient space within the building to accommodate the 27 units. And this is how the building did look, how it should look. So any restoration would be intended to bring it back into that type of appearance. So as already mentioned and as pointed out on site, there are significant level differences. I won't go into too much detail, but you can see here that the existing buildings are set well down into the site, and the houses will be positioned, or some of the houses will be positioned on a much higher level. Now, as part of the application, we have requested information relating to the access road to show that it is feasible to get an appropriate gradient in the site and an appropriate access. And so the applicant has demonstrated that they can deal with the levels on site. Again, highlighting in this image here just some information about how the levels change across the site. So it is a challenge to get the access in, but it is certainly feasible. And as we, probably academic now because we did see this from the site, but just showing the site as it stands now. So it's acknowledged there are properties just beyond the pole land, fairly close to the open fields, and so any reserve matter submission would have to have regard to ensure no significant impact on those properties. And this is just to highlight the allocation of the site. So you can see this is the unitary development plan. You've got the pole land, the sliver of land nearest the houses, a small area of housing allocation, and then the rest of it's greenbelt. The emerging local plan, it's all highlighted as red, which is a mixed use. So that includes greenbelt. So in policy terms, the proposals are considered acceptable. Whilst new housing is proposed in the greenbelt, the amount of floor space and volume of the dwellings would not be any greater. In fact, would be less than the demolition element. So the amount to be demolished is greater than the proposed housing. So it doesn't conflict with the greenbelt policy in that sense. It's a previously developed site, so again, in greenbelt terms, the redevelopment of greenbelt sites is acceptable, providing there's no significant impact on openness. And in this case, the applicants calculated that the greenbelt matters have been satisfactorily addressed. In terms of housing development on the pole land, it's acknowledged that there would be a loss of openness of this piece of land. There will be some visual impact, but that's considered to be outweighed by the council's inability to be able to demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. And as for the housing allocation, obviously housing on this particular element, this part of the site is considered acceptable. You'll see again in the report there's some information about the loss of employment land. The existing buildings, most of floor space is derelict. There are some uses on the site and there is some employment on the site, but it's not a particularly attractive investment for any future occupiers. And it's the view of officers that the comprehensive redevelopment of this site would actually result in some benefits in order to restore a neglected and derelict site. So all the other issues highlighted in the report have been adequately addressed. Clearly, one of the main issues is the potential impact on the highway network. Now, in terms of highways, the applicant has been asked to provide significantly more information through the application process. That's involved doing additional survey work, providing some more qualitative data about the footpaths in the area, the location of bus stops, etc. And as you'll see from the update, it's recommended that a financial contribution be made to New Mill Junction, along with some other transport infrastructure contributions. But I'll let my colleague in Highways, Steve Sampson, just come in on the highways impact in respect of this scheme.
Through you, Chair. Steve Sampson, Highways Development Management. To summarise the highways section of the report and update, with the discounting of the peak hour vehicular trips associated with the existing uses on the site, the proposal as a whole is forecast to generate some 58 new two-way vehicular movements and 14 pedestrian movements within the peak hours. 39 of these trips are forecast to go through the New Mill Junction, to which a contribution towards junction improvements is required. The proposed site access, internal layout and parking provision associated with the apartments and B1 use are considered to be acceptable. A qualitative pedestrian route survey has been carried out by the applicant's highways consultant via Solutions. Highways Development Management generally concur with their findings in that within the context of the existing local pedestrian infrastructure, there is little scope to provide material improvements. Public transport provides limited access to the site, with one service throughout the day every 30 minutes, and two other local services within the morning. To support these services, real-time information for the nearby bus shelter and a Metro card contribution is required. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Just to summarise the conclusion to the application, it is recommended that planning permission be granted as this is considered to be a sustainable development. Members will note from the update that a number of contributions are recommended to areas of infrastructure, including education, affordable housing to be calculated as part of the reserve matters, and as already touched upon by my colleague, potential improvements to New Mill Junction through a financial contribution. The only other thing to add is, since the update, the applicant has confirmed in respect of public open space that the public open space contribution to the change of use element would be secured within the development itself. So in that case, there wouldn't be a need for a financial contribution to public open space for the change of use, and a further calculation or a further analysis will be undertaken in terms of public open space provision when and if reserve matters came forward in future. So in other words, we would deal with public open space as part of the reserve matters. And that's as far as it goes, Chair. Thanks.
We've got Councillor Pennington, Councillor Nigel Patrick.
Thank you, Chair. Well, this is a massive site in a small village location, 75 houses and 27 apartments, on a site surrounded by substandard roads. You've been out there today. It's an employment site. Very few of these sites left in Home Valley South. An employment site with existing businesses serve notice to quit, so let's not pretend there is no demand for employment use at this site. Now we've seen other pole sites lost, and there is some pole on this land at the top, as you've seen, next to Kemp's Way. There's also a small area of allocated housing land. But the greater part of this land is employment land. And if approved, I actually put in my notes 3/4, but it's substantially more than 3/4 of the site will become housing, and the remainder offices. It is shown in the emerging local plan as mixed use, but to all intents and purposes, this planning application is really just housing with a tiny bit of employment land. The site is on 2 levels, which lends well to creating housing at the top, leaving the bottom for light industry and offices. But the applicant wants these 27 apartments at the bottom, which means there is no chance of light industry. If this is approved, there will be no employment land use, or very little, left on this site. And I think the applicant or future owner of this land, if this is approved, will come back, and I think there'll be a lot more houses, and I think the offices will go all together. This will just be a one big housing site, and I think the loss of housing, the loss of employment land is a massive loss to the area. I don't think the applicants listened to public opinion. If they had done, we would have seen fewer houses, no apartments, and certainly more employment land retained. For me, the 27 apartments kills this application stone dead. These apartments restrict the type of employment use around them, and they will create huge parking problems. I've seen the figures, but I'm expecting to see overflow parking on the road, and it's too narrow to take any extra parking. If we look at the contributions, 34,000 towards New Mill Junction is meagre for a total of 102 dwellings. The site was approved not long ago at Scholes for 39 dwellings, just 39 dwellings, and the contribution towards New Mill Junction for that site is £141,000. 102 dwellings, another 200 car movements. Most of them will queue at New Mill Junction. We've got a scheme for New Mill Junction, £600,000 it's going to cost. We can only put 5 schemes, 5 Section 106 schemes towards New Mill Junction. And if we're only going to get £34,000, we're never ever going to be able to put New Mill Junction right. I think this scheme should be bringing in £200,000 for New Mill Junction. I think it's really disappointing that the update suggests there's no money towards public open space, because we may well be able to use some of that, if indeed you want to approve this application. In my mind, though, I think committee should refuse the application. I'd like the applicant to go back to the drawing board and come back with something sensible that includes much more employment land and fewer dwellings. I'd ask you please to refuse the application. Thank you.
Councillor Penton.
Thank you, Chair. As a councillor, I've got a duty of care for my constituents, and it's in this light that I'm here today to talk about this development, which is huge, in conjunction with the rest of the village. Having lived across from the site for 54 years, I actually know when it was working fully, up to capacity. I know what it's been like while it's been decreasing in business, etc. I also know, I've been there through all the seasons, deep snow, ice and everything, and know what the road infrastructure is like and what it's like to get out of Jackson Bridge to get to New Mill or to get onto the 616, etc. I'm a bit upset in a way because when this was presented to the public, it was much more amenable, I think, to accept, and the public thought that that's what was going to go off. But obviously it's changed, and it's not changed in my mind for the better, although I do concede that something will have to be done on this site, and I'm not against that. But it has to fit in, and it has to be right to the workings of both the constituents and to the highway network. 200 cars coming out of there, that's an estimate, I would think, of what will come off this site. Again, what's upsetting is the loss of light industry. We were promised on the public consultation that there would be some light industry in there, which would help our small businesses and that thrive in the valley. That's disappeared because that type of light industry can't exist against this the flats that's there. And I remember, obviously, years ago, when some of this site was deemed to be turned into flats, the one at the back there, with the swimming pool there at the back, but that's been extinct for many years and was never carried out, and that was one on its own. So in that case, when that was passed, the highway infrastructure would take that. What's sad to see as well is that I don't think the highways engineers have looked at it carefully to what we need if this site gets the okay. I think that we need a one-way system in Jackson Bridge, and I think the system, having driven down there and gone to work every day, I've only missed one day in 54 years of going down to my businesses through the weather. But I do know that when them weathers come, there is a route to take. The one-way system needs to be on the 616 past the red line and turn down right into the bottom, and the egress out wants to come then up the steep, up the slope, out there onto the 616. That would help the flow of traffic that's going to come from this business. I've seen when that business is in full blow, 14 wagons a day used to come from Onley, Thurston Mills at Onley, up to Dobroyd, feeding that thing. And I know the consequences of that. So again, that's something I would like to see. I think there's a lot of fine-tuning to go on this application yet. And it needs to be fine-tuned, and it needs to be nailed on, because obviously we're pleased to see that something could be done and everything's not going to go derelict, but it needs to be right. So there, I'm therefore asking for a refusal or a deferment, so that we can negotiate further and get this site right. And I know monetary-wise that the applicants really need something to go quite quickly on this, and I understand that, but we have to have it right, and I think there is some compromises. I think we need to look at them. Certainly need to look at the highways. Certainly need to look at where the road comes out into Jackson Bridge there. Certainly need to make sure, that it's important, Chair, I'll just tell you this, that the water system there is looked at and dealt with properly, because it runs straight under the site, straight under those buildings. There has to be no restricted flow through those mill dams, because if they do, then we're going to get more flooding at New Mill, which we get now. So that's my position, Chair. I know something's got to be done. Look, let's have it right. Okay? Yeah, thank you very much.
In any particular order? Yeah, so Nick Willock, who's the agent speaking on behalf of the applicant.
Thank you, Chair, members. Just firstly, talking about the commercial uses, the scheme that went to the exhibition last July included another floor of commercial uses, and we originally proposed cafe, light industry and offices. The cafe generated so much parking that there wasn't enough room around the mill to include where the access road's going to go to cater for the parking from the UDP parking requirements from highway officers. And secondly, highway officers were requesting a direct lorry servicing access to the light industrial uses to the front of the building. And unfortunately, that's simply not possible with the space available. So we've ended up with office uses only, but the applicant doesn't have any strong feelings either way. We've just been constrained by UDP requirements on servicing and parking. But this is an opportunity to redevelop a large brownfield industrial site that has not been used at full capacity for 43 years. The most important historic building will be retained. The proposed closure of the vehicular access onto Butt Lane will improve highway safety due to its narrowness and poor visibility displays. It will, however, be retained for pedestrian and cycle access, allowing local residents to walk or cycle between Hepworth and Jackson Bridge on a quieter route. The proposals will reduce the impact on the green belt by replacing almost blanket industrial building coverage with a relatively low density development interspersed with open space and landscaping. A significant sum will be paid in total through a Section 106 agreement towards school places. And in terms of the update report, there is a request for a belated request for a monetary contribution towards public open space. However, we feel there's been a misunderstanding on this. The POS will be implemented on site, as you can see, and will be managed privately through a service charge levied on each property, so there shouldn't be any need for a monetary contribution towards POS. Finally, the future of Hepworth Brass Band's accommodation on site will be secured through the retention of the building they currently use, providing long-term certainty for the band. Members, this is an excellent example of a brownfield regeneration project. It will be very costly to complete, and hence the development of the POL and housing allocated areas of the site are essential to cross-subsidise the brownfield areas, in particular the costs associated with the access road and its significant topographical challenges. Myself, the applicant's commercial agents and the highways engineer are here to answer any questions members may have. Thank you.
Mike Hay, who's the commercial agent, speaking on behalf of the applicant.
Good afternoon, Chair and members. Thank you for letting me speak. My name is Michael Haig. I'm a chartered surveyor from Dove Haig Phillips, and we advise the current site owners of Z Hinchliffe and Sons on their property matters. My family also owned and ran Dobroyd Mills from 1919 through to 1974. I've also lived in the Home Valley, the Hepworth and Skulls area for the last 48 years, so know the site well. I'm speaking here this afternoon on behalf of the directors of Z Hinchliffe, who unfortunately aren't able to be here because they've got business commitments abroad. James is in India, Graham Wilby's in America, and Robert Hinchliffe, unfortunately, ill in hospital. Z Hinchliffe and Sons was established in 1766, moved to Denbydale in 1850, and they're a globally respected business. And they employ 130 people locally. The business acquired John Woodhead's, as we know, and with it Dobroyd Mills, as linked with a contract with a national retailer. The contract unfortunately ended up as being unviable, rendering the site surplus to operational requirements. The mill's layout and the design are inefficient and inappropriate for modern methods of manufacturing, and it lies in a location that is remote for good logistics, communications and connections. Very sadly, this leaves the site obsolete, as well as being a financial burden on the main operating costs of the core business. The granting of a viable planning consent will allow Z Hinchliffe and Sons to invest further in their future expansion plans in Denbydale and also in Kirklees. The directors and the employees are hopeful that the members are minded to grant this application, and a decision this afternoon is extremely important for the business. Thank you very much for hearing.
Right. Members, it's open to you now. Who's going to start batting? Paul?
Can I ask you a couple of questions before I make a comment? I did ask you that. Actually, on the bus, whether it was a departure or not, and actually in here it says it is a departure. Is it a departure?
Yeah, through you, Chair. It is. It's development on pole land, so it departs from the unitary development plan in that sense.
Right.
The Greenbelt issue, it's compliant with Greenbelt policy, but it departs from the pole allocation.
That's okay, Matthew, thank you. There's a couple of questions I want to ask about loss of footpaths and whatever, but one thing that I am concerned about really is the speed of which we're being asked to determine this. And there seems to be so many things that's outstanding. In particular, we were talking about, and even the agent said there's some confusion about the POS and whether that POS is correct and what's actually happened with that. But if you look at the recommendations, it says in circumstances 106 agreement is submitted. We're talking about the affordables here and whether the vacant buildings apply. Surely we should have that information prior to us making that decision here today.
Yeah, through you, Chair. I'm not sure I fully understand your question, but I'll try and answer and you can come back to me on it. So vacant building credit the calculation has been run by the applicant, and that's been looked at by Strategic Housing. We've previously had this discussion, but it's a material planning consideration as to whether it's policy. That's a different debate altogether. But in running that calculation, what it effectively means is that there wouldn't be any affordable housing requirement just from the change of use, and there would still be some left over to reduce the amount required for any outline application and any reserved matters that came forward. So the long and the short of it is that based on the quantum that's been put forward, so based on 102 units, it's an affordable housing requirement of £74,000, I think, which equates to slightly less than one unit. I think I'm right in saying. So we have got that information, and we've run the calculation based on the fact that the application proposes to demolish buildings which we consider to be vacant. So that has been factored into the recommendation.
Why haven't we got access to that information then?
Sorry, through you, Chair.
How it's being calculated, that's why.
Well, if it's not in the report,
are we not deemed to understand it?
If it's not in the report, the applicant's run a calculation. It might well be online in the planning statement. I can't guarantee that it's online, but it probably should be if it isn't. But it has been. It's in the public domain insofar as we have that information. It's not a secret in that sense. I understand you've not seen that. If it's not in the report, then I don't have that information to hand.
The fixed figure is in the report. How it's calculated is not in the report.
Okay.
And all I'm saying to you is we went through this last time in private session. We're members of the committee, and we should be able to look at some of the information that's been provided and see whether that is correct or incorrect. And this is the role of us as members of that committee, is to ensure what people are saying, what developers are saying to us, that we can question that. That's why I think there is insufficient information in here. There's a lot of speed to get this application actually decided today. And I don't think there's sufficient in there. Have we done an impact assessment? Has an impact assessment been carried out?
Through you, Chair. In respect, an environmental impact assessment, the application's been screened to decide whether EIA or environmental impact assessment is required, and it's considered that it's not required in this case. It wouldn't result in significant environmental effects, therefore EIA is not required. And I'm fairly sure that that information is online because that's the first process of screening. When an application comes in, we screen to see if it does need EIA or not.
All right, I'll give somebody else a chance and I'll come back in on that.
Thank you, Chair. Well, we're looking at something in Hepworth which is the largest conversion Hepworth's had in many, many years. And it's big, really big. It's a big conversion. And to my way of thinking on what we've seen this morning and looking at the infrastructure, I asked the question, as highways being involved with the infrastructure, I don't just mean our local highways, but highways in general, and has Yorkshire Water had any input into the sewage and surface water drainage systems? Because after meeting them the other day, we were told that they had not. Now, these are big jobs, big building jobs, massive, and nobody seems to worry too much about the infrastructure. And really, if you put that on one side and rush things through, and by the way, there's nothing gained by rushing, and I don't intend to let this be rushed, because at the end of the day, it's got to, like I've said before, it's got to be right. If it's going to be done, it's got to be right. And as I see it just at present, there was a light industrial put down, B1C, along with offices, but now appears on the plan 27 apartments, of which we've had an excuse as to why we're getting 27 apartments, and we can't have light industrial now because of these apartments. So really, there's going to be no workplace there for anybody. And of course, you look then at highways. Taking highways into consideration, the only way out to Huddersfield onto Sheffield Road is via Bridge Street, and that invariably, on the times I used, is blocked by traffic parked on both sides of the road. We were very fortunate this morning. We got out with the bus without even having to stop. More often than not, it takes me probably sometimes between 5 and 10 minutes to get from the bottom of Jackson Bridge onto Sheffield Road. And that is no exaggeration. People have a tendency to park outside the houses and in some cases down there on both sides of the road. So we've got to look into things like that. Councillor Sims mentioned a one-way system. Well, something like that. We've got to think about these things because we have just that one way out. The only other way out is East Street, which takes you onto Sheffield Road. You can actually make that into a one-way system either going into Jackson Bridge or coming out. It's things that need looking into. It's not just a case of putting all this down on a piece of paper and expecting the committee to just give it the nod. Because I'm sorry, you've got somebody on this committee that don't give everything the nod. It's just as easy as that. Looking further on, we have got to look, as I say, at the infrastructure, the sewage, the surface water drainage. Now, we know, well, Ken does more than me, he's been involved with 2 floods in Hepworth, 3 o'clock in the morning, up to his armpits in water, helping to clear it. That's another thing that nobody seems to take into consideration. And, of course, there's the parking. I don't know how much parking's been allowed, but, again, that's another thing that needs taken into consideration. The assessment, apparently, the environmental assessment, I'm told, I've heard not 2 minutes ago, is now no longer required. It's not required, an assessment on environment or whatever. It's not required. Well, why? Why, for goodness sake? This is a big conversion. As I've put, it's the largest conversion Hepworth's had since it was brought into existence. And that's a long time ago. So please, let's get this sorted out and done properly, and let's not rush it, because if we're going to rush it, it'll be a mess. And we don't want that, because remember this, we rushed the job at Tenterhill, and now we get the problem when the sewers get blocked up and you've excreta all over the road. It's Ken, Nigel and myself that has to pick that up. And we're getting a bit sick of telling people about these things before they happen, and then nobody takes any notice, and suddenly it's all happening and it's down to us three again. Well, we'll just get a little bit sick and fed up of it. So please, let's get the job right before we do any considering of any consideration in this, please. And if we have to defer it, let's defer it. Thank you.
Bill and then Andrew.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think with this scheme there is a very, very big plus in my view, and that is it's a brownfield redevelopment. And I am very keen, as a general rule, to see brownfield prioritised. So I think that's a big plus for this. Now, I've listened to colleagues who know the area very well, and I see a couple of negative points. And the first one for me is the loss of, or the potential loss of employment provision. Now, I think that's important. I'm very mindful of the situation at Linley Moor, where we've lost a lot of employment land. I think we need to be very careful about sacrificing more employment land. Also, it's part of the greater plan of things that more people will live closer to their place of work, which again says that this scheme really does need to be providing the maximum amount under the circumstances of employment opportunity. And I think we're nibbling away potentially too far at that. Moving on to more physical things, if you like, and infrastructure is obviously quite a problem here. We're looking at road networks that do have issues. We're hearing about sewage systems that have issues. We're hearing about potential flood areas. We're hearing about actual floods in recent times. We do need, I think, to actually look more closely at this. I don't think we've got enough information. There might be enough information within the system or within Kirklees planning, but there's not enough information, I think, here. So I'm actually prepared to propose deferment. I want to see brownfield developed, especially a large site, but I don't think we've got enough here to make a balanced decision. So I'll propose deferment of this. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Can I start by asking a question about the public open space? Because you can't see it very clearly from that. Well, you still really can't see it totally, but the mill pond, for instance, is not within the red line. And although that means that it's in the same ownership as the rest of the site, it's not technically part of the planning application. So given that it's one might say critical in relation to this application because of what reasonably large bodies of water can do if not properly regulated. I just wonder how exactly we have control over that. I'm not saying we shouldn't have control over it, but I'm just not clear how it's going to work, given that it's outside the red line. Perhaps somebody cleverer than I can explain how that will actually work.
Through you, Chair. You can see from the plan above, it's under the control of the it's within the applicant's control. It's in the blue line boundary. As already stated, we don't know the detail of the public open space for the change of use or for the reserved matters in future, albeit that on the master plan there are indicative areas of POS, public open space. But clearly the Mill Pond area might be an area where some of the public open space could be facilitated. That would involve a further discussion with the landscape officer. Hence, the update to committee is, whilst the landscape officer did request a financial contribution, there appears to be space within the site, within the applicant's control, within the blue line, where the public open space could be provided just for the change of use, and then the remaining public open space will be subject to the detail submitted at reserved matters.
Thank you for that. It's one of these. It's one thing in relation to this application, which seems to me to be a bit of a grey area, I'm coming to the conclusion that we perhaps ought to defer it in order to try and sort some of these things out. There is another issue which was raised by Councillor Patrick in relation to the junction at New Mill. The considerable disparity in the amount offered from this application compared with another one only about a mile away in relation to the same junction. And I find that distinctly odd. Now, I do wonder whether the same standards are being applied, or are we just taking money that's been offered without much thought as to how it relates to other things? And there is another issue that I did question the subject of is this a sustainable location? And it does have the merit of actually being on or very close to a bus route. And I don't regard a half-hour service as all that bad, and compared with some places. So in that sense, the provision of Metro cards would be a good thing, because I think what that's designed to do is to get people into the habit of using the bus service that is already there, and which, given the additional housing on the site, could actually be enhanced, because the pool of demand has actually been grown. But coming back to the original sort of thing, this is a brownfield site, mainly in the green belt, and there are lots of these all over Kirklees. Not all of them are going to have the ability of being reused for business. What I regret is that this is not being used enough for business, and points have already been made about the difference between what was in an exhibition and what has now come up here. I think there are so many things that need to be sorted out in this, that if it has been moved for deferral, I would second it. I'm not sure whether it has, because I think we right, okay. Well, I think we need satisfaction on quite a large number of points that we've not got at the moment.
Thanks, Chair. Just a bit of clarity then from the committee. If you are going down the deferral route, you're wanting for this to be brought back with further information regarding to sewage, infrastructure, transportation, affordable housing, public open space, and vacant building credit. Does that summarise it? Flood.
Chair, can I just come back on a couple of points that I made earlier? And that, even in the update, it says here, however, at this stage, the total floor space and quantum of development is unknown. That's not the basis of how we should be making our decision here today. It's in the report, Matthew. It's there. It says it's unknown at this stage. Can I also say one other thing, and this is about the sequential test. And it says, refers to impact assessment, that impact assessment will be necessary for proposals which include retail, leisure and office development centre. Thank you.
It's quite an extensive list of things for us to take away. And I understand where you're coming from on a lot of the points, but there isn't necessarily any new information that we'll be able to provide you. We will be able to regurgitate some of the information that's in the supporting documents that isn't in the main body of the text, but there isn't actually any new information as such. So in terms of taking it away, we can do that. We can come back and try and embellish some of the points that aren't necessarily as clear as you would like. But in terms of the substance of the recommendation and in terms of the request for committee in terms of what we're asking you to make a decision on today, I don't think that the meat of that would change in any way, shape or form. So I'm happy to try and pick up the points you want, but I'm not sure where it will take us in terms of additional recommendations or changes on those points. So just members, just to make that point.
Thank you, Chair. Well, actually, I think I'm going to talk against refusing it. Deferring, sorry, not refusing. Beg your pardon. I don't think it's been rushed. It's been obviously been discussed with officers for a year, at least, since the application was in. We have got responses from all the relevant statutory bodies and others, including Yorkshire Water, who say they have no objection. I don't know what deferral will actually achieve. I do understand that there's some unanswered questions, but it is outlined. We will get full information later. I can't see, well, personally, put it this way, if all that information was with us, I would agree in total to this application. I think it's a good use of the site. I think there is some business use. We can't really expect, I don't even think, like industrial on this site, given the access arrangements. But there is some business use. It's mixed-use development. I think it will get rid of a few eyesores in the area. And I think, just improving the junction or improving the bus services, which hopefully this development will add to as well, will mean that it's a general uplift in the area. So even with a bit more, even without that bit more information, which perhaps we could have, I can see the potential for this, and I would be happy to support it if. I will vote against deferring it anyway.
Chair, can I just make one quick comment, and I apologise for this. Whether I'm being cynical or not here, the information that the basis of which some of this report has been put together, we ain't got in front of us, and that's all I'm looking at. I don't think it's a bad application. I think there's issues around it, but in actual fact, what we've done in many occasions previously, when we've gone for an outline application, the developers later down the line, they've used it against us, saying, well, you've already accepted that outline. Yeah. That is all I'm saying to you. The fact is that developers will try everything they possibly can to not pay any contributions. This menial £33,000 towards new mill, we need to be looking at that. That is just, for me, is not acceptable. when further down the road it costs £200,000. It is not fair. That is all I'm trying to say to you. And if at the end of the day we've got all that information there for us to have a look at, then that's fine, and I'll accept that. But I don't think there's sufficient information in there for us to actually decide this today. Thank you very much.
Right, it has been... Matthias? Yeah? Then we're going to vote.
Not to sway. Every application on its merits, yeah? When we're talking about the difference between the Scholes application of the poll site as it was, where the larger contribution was levied, this committee decided, or the committee decided that instead of allocating that money to public open space, which was the 145,000 that was secured from Scholes, the committee decided that it preferred its priority for that application's 106 package to go to a new mill scheme. So instead of delivering public open space, it chose new mill. But you can do that here now if you so decided. You could look at that 106 package, as you did then, and say to us, our priorities are, for example, education is a priority, but instead of travel planning, take the Councillor Pinnock's point, so just to make an example, that your priority is that that money is redirected to new mill. The calculation of £33,880 is based on a formula that we have applied across the district in relevant terms to impacts on junctions. That is a site-specific generated impact, and that contribution qualifies that. At Scholes, you said, we don't want to put the money towards public open space, we want to put it to new mill. That's a decision for a committee to arrive at. It is a package of money that is available, and if members have different priorities than the recommended list that we have put in front of you, and subject to those meeting the test, you can decide what your priorities are, members. So that's why I wanted to be very clear that we are making a fair and transparent decision at New Mill as opposed to at Scholes. They are not comparable in that sense. Thank you.
Chair, members, the calculation for affordable housing has been with officers since August. It came from Housing Services. That information is available. I don't know why it's not here today in January, but it's available. The New Mill Junction, it's a net figure based on a brownfield site, and the existing traffic is netted off, so we're not dealing with a comparison to a greenfield site where it's all new traffic. And then just very briefly, we're not sure what more information we can provide on things like highways, sewerage. We've been at it 9 months. We've submitted everything. We've dealt with all the issues. All the consultees are happy now. I'm not sure what more we can provide, but you know, we'll help where we can.
Right, members, it's been put forward that we defer it. I mean, going on site visit this morning, there's something that come to mind. Myself, there's... on his latest update, £46,000 Metro cards. I think that, throw that in with New Mill personally, myself, the junction. Anyway, it's been put that we defer it. It's been moved by Councillor Armour. It's been seconded by Councillor Pinnock. All those in favour of deferring, please show. Those against?
5-1.
That's 5-1. That's what Huddersfield are going to win by on Saturday. That's 5-1 in favour of deferring. Yeah. Yeah. Be able to get it together for that time or not? Yeah. Right. Next we move on to page 63, and this is the application at Stony Bank Lane. And I'm sure you're aware that there's 2 applications for the same site. Matthew again. we've got some yellow papers with us for this, viability. Now, as you're aware, there's two items, virtually the same. Now, if people are wanting to speak, can they speak on both items at the same time, rather than speak on this and then come back and speak on other thing, which you're going to probably be saying the same things time after time? And if we do need to go into private session, it will be that people that are not on the committee will need to leave the room and then come back in when we feel as though we're ready and have all those answers. Right? Matthew.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So this presentation involves two applications which are intrinsically linked. So you've got 2017-93053, which is the reserve matters for 48 dwellings, and then you've got the other application, 2017-93609, for 4 units. And I'll explain the reasons why they're linked shortly. But what you've got before you on the slide is the layout for the reserve matters application. So, as I say, it's 48 dwellings submitted on the back of an outline planning permission. It was granted in 2014. And you'll see from the next slide that this is the red line boundary for the full application for 4 dwellings. Now, the reason for 2 separate applications as part of the same scheme is because the outline application included a red line boundary which was tighter around the site than the land ownership. And what that effectively meant is that the reserve matters was constrained. It couldn't facilitate the development on the full ownership of the site. So the outline granted, the red line boundary was smaller than the initial reserve matters. So in order to address the issues with the red line boundary, you'll see from this separate full application, there are small areas of what appear to be just red lines, but they're actually denote the land ownership, and so they're to accompany the reserve matters submission. So you'll see at the top of the site, for example, that the gardens, numbers 17 to 12, are the rear gardens associated with the details on the reserve matters. So in essence, the 2 schemes are one of the same, albeit that there is different mechanisms by which the applications have been assessed. So I won't go into that detail any further. So the following slides are the complete scheme, the master plan, the whole scheme, the two applications. So the application site comprises an elongated parcel of sloping land, approximately 1.5 kilometres to the north of Home Firth and 1.3 kilometres to the west of New Mill. At the bottom of Stony Bank, you can just see on this plan, there's a collection of approximately 20 units, which were built not so long ago. Now the site occupies 2.4 hectares. It's currently used as agricultural pasture land. At the top of the site, the closest neighbours comprise the old tank house, which, as I pointed out on site, is a red brick building, red brick dwelling, at the very corner of the site. And beyond this lies, and just behind, lies another dwelling, Cobley Green, which they're both accessed off Stony Bank Road. There are further dwellings on the opposite side of Stony Bank Lane and off Stony Bank Road. The site is currently fronted by a dry stone wall. The fields are also divided by dry stone walls. The proposal would incorporate the dry stone wall into the scheme. So altogether, the proposal involves the 48 dwellings as reserve matters and the 4 dwellings as part of the full. So it's 52 dwellings in total. And as you'll see from the layout, a number of the units have direct access off Stony Bank Lane and Stony Bank Road, so private driveways. Just in terms of the green space, the public open space, that is provided on site as part of the scheme, and mainly this comprises an area of land at the bottom of the slope near the river, and this at the moment is a large area of woodland, and it's intended that this would be managed, thinned out, a small number of trees taken out to facilitate one of the drainage sewers into the river. but that, in essence, will be a usable area of public open space for future residents, for other people that live in the local area. And as you can see, those are the bits that would be put into effectively a management company secured by Section 106 agreement. So the liability would lie with a management company to look after those areas. You'll appreciate from our site visit, the site does slope very steeply. Now, the scheme's been designed with a central access point, and as I pointed out on site, this access point is fixed because it's been determined and accepted as part of the outline planning permission. The main spine road runs approximately through the central portion of the site and then turns left and right at a 90-degree angle. So you've effectively then got a road which runs parallel to Stonybank Lane towards the rear of the site. Now, most of the units proposed are detached. There are a small cluster of terrace units within the scheme, as you can see from the plan. And there are a number of three-storey semi-detached units at the top of the site. The drawing you can see before you just indicates how the scheme would appear in relation to Stonybank Lane, taking into account the sloping nature of the site. So you can quite clearly see that it falls from more or less the top of the hill right down the slope. So that's the bottom street scene is actually taken from Stonybank Lane, just to give an idea of levels. And as you'll note from the update, there's been some negotiation and agreement in terms of materials, which I'll come on to shortly. But this is a computer-generated image submitted by the applicant to give an idea as to how the scheme would appear from the top of Stonybank Lane, just to give an idea in terms of the massing and the design of the units. The applicant has worked with us to try and make sure that the vernacular and the design of the dwellings is in keeping with the local area. So it's clear from the site visit that the most prominent part of the site, or the closest part of the site to the road, is that bit that faces Stonybank Lane. Now, as you'll see from the update, there has been a viability exercise undertaken, but notwithstanding the viability issues, and you've all been circulated with a confidential paper which elaborates on this point, but notwithstanding what's in the viability, the applicant proposes to provide 9 units to the front of the site as natural stone, with the remaining units within the site, as depicted by the plan, by the slide. They would all be an art stone product, samples of which were taken on the bus. Now, in terms of the art stone materials and the general design of the scheme, the proposed dwellings are considered to be well designed, and in this case the use of art stone on the units within the site is considered that this would assimilate with the design of both the scheme itself, so the natural stone units to the front, and other houses within the local area. It's noted that there are other units locally which are not natural stone, and one of the most notable examples is the Old Tank House, which is a red brick building. There are some others dotted sporadically around the local area. However, I would add that mostly houses in the area are of natural stone. But in addition, the site isn't in a conservation area, so that is one of the requirements we would look at in terms of insisting on stone being provided throughout, and it isn't in a conservation area. So in this case, given the relatively high quality product that's been proposed, so we consider that the art stone being proposed is of high quality, and the design of the units is of high quality as well. We don't feel that it would be detrimental to the character and appearance of the area to use this material within the scheme, albeit that we would request, and that has been confirmed by the applicant, that they would be willing to provide the natural stone units to the front of Stonybank Lane. Now, just to have a quick look at one of the house types, as I say, the applicants work with officers to try and get something. We've altered, the window styles have been altered by the applicant. They've incorporated some features which are more predominant of the local area in terms of how the roof's styled and the window styles, etc. Now, as I've already elaborated in respect to viability, that is subject to potentially a separate discussion. However, to clarify the position in terms of what the applicant is proposing as part of this scheme, it is that 20% of the scheme comprise starter homes, which officers are happy to support as affordable units in this case. And you can see from the plan that the starter homes would be positioned as detailed. And looking at these particular units, it's considered that the 20% discount applied to these would, in our view, make them relatively affordable for first-time buyers, and therefore it would be appropriate in this case to accept starter homes as an affordable housing product. The other thing that's on offer in this case is the provision of natural play equipment and a trim trail type scheme within the public open space, and in addition a £20,474 contribution towards off-site play provision, in addition to the things I've mentioned, the equipment within the public open space. But members should also be aware that the following contributions have already been secured through the previous outline planning permission, and that is approximately £220,000, £962 towards 2 local schools, a sum of £50,000 towards traffic calming on Springwood Road, a sum of £24,750 towards the cost of New Mill Junction improvements, and there is details of a sum of £15,000 towards the provision of Metro cards. So, in essence, notwithstanding the viability position, officers are satisfied that this scheme complies with policy in providing infrastructure, and it complies with policy in terms of design and appearance. Now, members will note that objections have been received from a number of local residents. Most notably, in terms of the potential impacts, are those 2 properties closest to the site. So I'll quickly just skip back. In fact, it shows you on this plan. So the 2 properties in question that are particularly close to the site are the Old Tank House and Cobley Green, which you can just see the edge of on the plan here. Now, what you probably did appreciate on site is the levels, but in addition to that, the applicant has agreed to work with the site levels in order to try and reduce the prominence of some of these units, which I'll show you in a second. But just looking at the Old Tank House initially, this property sits on a higher level than the application site, and the outlook from the windows of this property look out generally across the fields associated with the application site. Now, the applicant has worked with officers to reduce the impact on the Old Tank House as much as practicable, and you'll see from this plan here the garage has been moved further down slope and the roof style has been altered, and plot number 1 has been slightly amended to reduce the impact on the Old Tank House. There's details in the report, so I won't go through the measurements, but in essence it meets the unitary development plan spacing requirements in terms of spacing. It's well in excess, and it's not considered that it would be overbearing because there's now a buffer between this particular house and the Old Tank House. And you'll also see from this plan here that this buffer would be then put into a management company, and its officers are recommending that some landscaping, maybe a wildflower meadow or something, be done there to provide possibly some additional amenity value to that area. Now, in terms of Cobley Green, which is on this plan as well, the proposed development involves reducing the land levels within the site by approximately 3 to 4 metres, and each of the proposed dwellings will be set 4 metres lower than the garden area associated with Cobley Green. Therefore, whilst these dwellings are 3 stories in height, they're on so much, in terms of levels, they're so much lower than this garden and this dwelling that they would actually appear less than 2 stories in height when viewed from this garden. And in addition, it does comply and it exceeds the council's spacing standards. And so in that respect, it complies and there's no significant impact on amenity. But it's probably best displayed through the cross sections So the top cross-section shows Cobley Green, the property, the ridge level, and then you can see the garden slope slightly down to the boundary. You would have effectively the garden associated with the properties closest to this, to the existing property at Cobley Green being set down. So you'd have a walkway across to the garden, and then there'd be a lower floor beyond. So officers are satisfied that this would negate any significant impact on amenity. Similarly with the old tank house, you can see how the relationship would work. There's sufficient distance there in our view to make sure that there's no significant impact on amenity. Finally, there are a number of protected trees along the boundary of the site. These would remain. The gardens of the properties proposed to the rear of the site have been designed. Some of them are fairly long when you look at the plans, but that is partly to try and address this wildlife corridor and these trees to make sure that in future occupiers don't have significant overshadowing of the garden. So as detailed in the officer report, all of the matters have been resolved. The principle of development concerning the full application is considered acceptable. Overall, in terms of the combined scheme, the layout and density is considered to be acceptable. The use of art stone and non-natural materials, in this case, are considered to be representative of good design and assimilate with the local area. And the front units would be natural stone, which would be in keeping with properties closest to the site. And the scheme's also been designed to reduce levels so as not to impact on residential amenity. So it's recommended that permission be granted subject to conditions set out in the main report, in the update, and subject to the Section 106 provisions set out, which are in the latest update. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, we have Keith Overson.
Thank you, Chair and Committee. You will have received within the last 24 hours, 48 hours, a statement which relates to the red line and the errors in the red line. I believe you were considering that this morning at your visit. I can say at this point now, even within the last 12 hours, that this may not now be a particular issue in terms of slowing down any application, which was certainly not my intention to do so, but I am still feeling that we do need some accuracy on the red line that meets the old tank house. However, having said that, I believe that working with Red Row, we can actually reach a point where it doesn't become an issue and won't require any legal representation. We have both, and I'm sure County have been in touch with the Land Registry and have confirmed that the red line does start at the junction with the Cobley Green boundary at a gate post, which has been there for 200 years, and I'm pretty sure that the errors are accounted for by 200 years ago they'd have used a trundle wheel to do the measurements, whereas today we do a GPS, and therefore there may well be the source of the error. I know that the scheme will go ahead, and I know that the important point for myself at the old tank house will be the residents' amenity, and from the report at the outline stage, it does say that the residents' amenity has to be considered very carefully. From my point of view, the ridge heights of plots 1 and 2, don't know if we can have the scat section views up. We have heard that the levels are lowered. Yes, they are. Please, that's the one that I want to look at. The levels have been lowered. The new house is much lower than the tank house, but please observe that the ridge level is still the same. So although we see in the report that the old tank house sits on a higher level than the applicant's site, and the outlook from a number of the windows look directly over the application site, that may infer that we're looking over rooftops. We're not. We're looking straight ahead at the house. Now, in terms of the distances, the distance from the front room to the building is no more, it's little more than the length of a through lounge in a semi-detached house. So that can be very misleading. So, sorry, yeah, I would add here that. Can I just say that Redrow themselves have pledged to do all they can to counter the adverse effects of plots 1 and 13 on the old tank house and no doubt Cobley Green. So I'm satisfied with that. I'm happy with the fact that there is a change in the level, but I do consider it is still overpowering. I've lived there long enough to know what's going to happen. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Susan Drake.
Sorry. Hello, Chair. I am Susan Drake and I live at Cobley Green. I've been there for 40 years. It was originally built by my in-laws in 1964 and object to the building because of the density and the type of houses, including the poor scheme layout. These are not reflective with the area, neither is the material used. I agree the country needs more housing, but this should fit in with the local area, as was quoted by the government in the budget last November, that the character of the area must be considered in the design of the houses, of the homes. Houses that suit first-time buyers should be built on brownfield sites and on a bus route, etc., which we are not on. The sewage system. We had a problem with that about 18 months ago. It must have been disturbed and a pipe was broken and I had sewage coming into my house. And Yorkshire Water came every day, some days twice, with a big wagon to pump it out. And down there I have my heating, it's not a boiler, it blows hot air through the house, and if I had that on, the smell obviously came through the house, so I couldn't have any heating on. And this was March, April. So obviously there's a problem with the sewage system, as I've heard before with the other houses. The big concern for me are the 3-storey houses that are going to be built up against my boundary wall. And they're going to be overlooking my house from the lounge, the dining room, the kitchen windows, from their bedroom windows that look straight into me, and from the side of my bungalow, they will look directly into my bedroom. Now, if they were either put towards the centre of the development, or they were small houses, single-storey, or just one floor, I would be happy. But as they are now, it's an infringement of my privacy, total infringement of my privacy. The roads obviously are not suitable. The children are walking backwards and forwards to school. There was a fatal accident on the top road where a young woman was killed by a vehicle. It's terribly dangerous. No idea how much traffic there is around there. It's wicked. And then with what? 200 more cars? Wow, can't cope with that. Right, that's it.
We've got Nick Willock, who will be speaking on behalf of residents who object to plans, and he will also be reading out a statement on behalf of someone else who had registered to speak but can't attend.
Thank you, Chair, members. I'm here to talk about 2 matters: the impact on one of the properties that you've just been hearing about, Cobley Green, and number 2, the failure of the development to respond to the character of the local area. The indicative layout plan at the outline planning stage showed 3 dwellings along the boundary shared with Cobley Green. The current application now shows 9 dwellings. This 3-fold increase would undoubtedly create an oppressive outlook for the occupier of Cobley Green and severely reduce the amount of privacy currently enjoyed. The cross-section submitted by the applicant has been drawn at the most favourable point and doesn't reflect the true relationship between the development and Cobley Green along the whole length of the boundary. Turning to the impacts on the area's character, I can personally say that this part of the Home Valley is a pleasure to travel through and experience. It is characterised by mature trees, hedgerows, stone walls, and generally large houses in generous grounds, some with historic and architectural interest. These low-density plots are surrounded by open fields and woodland, and it is one of the most distinctive and pleasant areas of the Home Valley and has its own unique character. UDP Policy BE1 requires development to retain a sense of local identity, while BE2 requires new development to be in keeping in respect of design, materials, scales, and importantly, density. The NPPF talks about improving the places in which people live their lives and says that development should add to the overall quality of the area, not detract from it, and that development should respond to local character and reinforce local distinctiveness. The whole thrust of recent planning guidance is to ensure that development is not allowed to spoil the local distinctiveness of areas, such as this, as developments did in the past. The idea is to get away from standardised developments that could be built anywhere. In this case, the development is a largely nondescript, placeless development bearing little relationship to local character. It is alien to the area's local distinctiveness in virtually every way: layout, density, boundary treatment and materials, other than a token effort to the front of the development. It is a typical case of a standard layout revolving around a straight estate road and finished off with standard house types. Members, if approved today, in the eyes of the people who've lived there most of their lives, this development will ruin the character of this part of the Home Valley forever. Local residents therefore request that the committee defer this application and ask the developer to go back to the drawing board, and that this should include input from local residents. Thank you. So this is written in the first person by the person who's actually written this, Mr. Bird. I consider the design of the internal highways to be unsuitable, primarily due to steep gradients which contravene the highways guidance notes on gradients. The main carriageway within the development is parallel to Stony Bank Lane and therefore is the same gradient, i.e. approximately 1 in 7 or 13%. The maximum gradient permitted under highways guidance notes is 1 in 10. It is not unreasonable to achieve shallower gradients. Additionally, it is commonly known to the neighbourhood that during wintry weather conditions, all vehicles park on Stony Bank Road and Springwood Road. It is highly likely that new residents will avoid driving onto their own estate by leaving vehicles on these roads. The proposed design should therefore reflect safety for the residents of the new scheme and for the existing neighbourhood. The current proposed layout has also been designed with one street elevation in a row or a straight line from south to north. Visually, this is unappealing, but more importantly, this is detrimental to the highway design and results in a long, steep road. Designing footways either side of the road is not a safety solution if a vehicle cannot stop travelling downhill. I do understand that Home Firth and surrounding valleys have steep highway gradients, but we should not be designing steep highways on new schemes when they can be avoided. In terms of scale, there is an increased density of housing to the rear of the estate. I would like the committee to consider the current density of the surrounding area and not just the suggestion that if you make the front of the estate pretty, then you can densely build at the rear. The density of the proposed scheme is simply not in character with the area. The scale of the development could easily be addressed by the following: more larger properties, bungalows to the top of the scheme, lessening the impact of the development, being more sympathetic to neighbouring properties, and a public bridleway through the scheme would also improve the density and in keeping with the natural environment which already exists. The landscape proposal for this greenfield site is inadequate and seems to ignore the green corridor in the UDP. Thank you.
Councillor Patrick.
Thanks, Chair. If committee members struggle with updates and information, you can imagine how we feel because we don't see all the updates, and I just had to rip up my what I was going to say. So this is more off the cuff. It might sound better than just reading it, but I might also get very confused. Can you just put that other slide up of the housing showing Stonybank Lane? No, the layout. There was two layouts. That one. Right, that one. Right. Well, I just want to say that we ward councillors were against this application when it went to outline. But where we are, so now we have to consider what's best for the area with all these houses going in. And I'll just take one point that Councillor Kane said. If you don't sort it out at the outline stage, the developers will leg you. I don't think he used these words, but they'll leg you up. They'll leg you up. And unfortunately, on this site, the access was agreed at outline, and Stonybank Lane is extremely narrow. That's the bit that goes down to the mill conversion at the bottom. Is extremely narrow, and in one of our meetings we said wouldn't it have been better if Stonybank Lane could have been made wider at the top there, could have been by taking in some of that land that the developers got, could have been made wider to make that access, to make that road two-way, which not two-way, it's only one-way. But they have put a pavement on it, so I suppose that's all we can get out of it now because that was all agreed at outline. I just want to. I think they've got the design wrong. I think they've got the types of houses wrong. It is more of an urban density than a rural density. And I think, if we're going to have all these houses, let's get it right. Let's make them look right in the right setting. Not build something that will look right in the suburbs of Huddersfield. The three-storey houses that back onto the old tank house and Cobley Green. There's no need for that. What they've done to this site is they've taken a slope site and they've stepped it. And what's not being talked about, which we talked about earlier, I think I've got another 3 minutes over. Was the retaining walls. Because they've stepped the site, they've put retaining walls in, and that's not being talked about, but there's going to be some fairly big retaining walls. It's visible across the valley. You can see the site from Brockhalls Road and all the properties above it, so the materials have got to be right. I don't consider art stone as good. I think it's rubbish, quite frankly. And I don't consider render good. This strategic planning committee a few weeks ago approved a large quarry extension at Crossland Moor. It seems that we're not going to use stone for these houses. We're going to use concrete, which is basically what art stone is. And I don't think there's any excuse that this is just all about the bottom line. Done the width of stone. Sewage. Officers consider all matters to have been resolved, so if we have a sewage leak, we know who to contact. Matthias, right? Just make a note of that one. Back on what we said earlier. Starter homes, 20% of the price. What price is the start? What price are these houses going to be sold? Are they going to start at 275,000, 300,000? What makes them affordable? If they're anything above 250,000, they're not affordable. So we didn't get that information. Contributions quickly. I think there's been a change with the updates, so this has confused me totally. I had 50,000 for Springwood Road. We don't need 50,000. We talked about this before. We might be able to do that with 20,000, so we might be able to use some of that other money for New Mill Junction. 24,000 for New Mill Junction. 16,000 for Metro cars, which I think are a waste of time. And, they're a waste of time in our area because the buses don't run very frequently. That's why people rely on the cars. and 102,000 towards a leap. 102,000 towards a leap. He says in the there's some suggestion. Some suggested about £20,000. This is just my last point. Some suggestion about £20,000 towards off-site public open space. But if the council is not going to maintain public open space, then that money, in my view, should go to New Mill Junction. Thank you.
Councillor Sims.
Oh, they are, right. You're a hard chairman, Chair. Thank you. Right. We're at a fait accompli, I can see that, and we did argue when it came for outline the provisions that we would have liked to see, and on this application we've not got it. They've bulldozed us in, they've put too many houses on that site. Also, the design is wrong, as we've heard, and they're not in stone. At least we should have had them all in stone. At least we should have had, once again, I'm going to say, highway contribution properly. And when you look at the site that we've just had on there, if you look, the site itself, the highway, is wider than the highway that everything's going to go in and out of. If you put that up, it's there blatantly to see. There you are, look. That internal road is wider than the one that's accessing it all. We should have had those houses moved back and that highway widened down there, and they could have taken it further back slightly at the back there and achieved that, but they've not done that. At least they've listened. We have got these front houses going straight onto the highway, but because it's so narrow, they're going to struggle. They're going to struggle in winter, that's for sure. And, you know, the design, it's got to be stone. It's got to be sorted out in a better design, because if you look further down the site, and I was involved in that site when it was all converted from a mill, brownfield site, etc. If you look at those houses, they're individual and they're styled, and they're done in stone, and a lot of times done in recycled stone. And this is totally alien to that. And as has been said, you know, in planning now, we're supposed to take these things on board. It's a rural area, it's not an urban area, it is a rural area, and we need to respect that. If you kill the rural area, you're going to kill the golden egg that's bringing in a lot of tourism. You know, nobody's going to keep coming just to see, you know, an urban area, all the houses the same, etc. You're going to kill it. So we need something doing properly on this side. It's got outline, but it needs to be stone, it needs to be the proper design, and it needs to be consideration of that highway there. Because in winter, even now, the people down below park on this road. And it's a fact. I know you think sometimes we romance, but we don't. If it goes through at this and it blocks up in winter, I'm going to be ringing our highways and I'll bring them up and I'll show them what the situation is, and that's the only way they'll learn. Let's get it right. Let's get some money out of them, because at the end of the day, if you don't, when this has been built, who's going to put the cost? Who's going to foot the cost of all the highway problems that we're going to get? Us, right? Now's the opportunity to get some money out of them properly and get it.
We have Laura Holland, who's the agent, speaking on behalf of the applicant.
Thank you, Chair. The principle of residential development was established in 2015 by the approval of outline planning permission. The applications before members today therefore detail with the detailed design. The feedback from the public exhibition held in July 2017 and from officers during pre-application discussions has informed the design of the scheme. Amendments have been made throughout the application process to ensure the design and the impact on the surrounding properties is acceptable and sympathetic. The capacity of the site for 53 units was established through the outline consent and also identified as appropriate within the draft housing allocation. The proposed density is reflective of the character of the area and sensitive to the surrounding natural and built environment. Three-storey split-level properties are proposed to the south of the site to address the change in land levels. The ridge heights of these proposed dwellings are designed to be at a lower level than the adjacent existing properties. Overshadowing of the old tank house and Cobley Green has been assessed by an external consultant who concluded there would be no additional transient overshadowing or loss of direct sunlight on the ground as a result of the development. The applicant is engaged at length with Dr Overson of the old tank house both prior to and during the application process, and as a result, Plot 1 has been moved a further 2.7 metres away from the old tank house and the proposed garage moved 2.5 metres further away to improve the relationship with this property. Plot 1 and 13 sit at a lower finished floor level than the old tank house, and in all respects, the separation distance proposed are well in excess of the standards set out in Policy BE12. The section drawings illustrate there will be no overlooking or overbearing impact of the adjacent properties. A mix of natural and artificial stone is proposed, with some properties incorporating render. The natural stone properties will front Stony Bank Lane, with the artificial stone properties set behind. Whilst the use of artificial stone in part does not fully comply with Policy B11, providing natural stone throughout the development would render the affordable housing contribution undeliverable. A similar approach to using a mix of artificial and natural stone whilst achieving the full on-site affordable housing contribution was granted permission on New Mills Lane for Jones Homes, which I understand members have visited today. The proposed artificial stone is of a very high standard and difficult to distinguish from natural stone. The proposed mix is not considered to be detrimental to the character of the appearance of the area and represents the best offer in terms of viability of the scheme, achieving as much natural stone as possible while delivering the 20% affordable housing. The proposed highways arrangements were found acceptable subject to mitigation measures, including financial contribution as part of the 106 as part of the outline consent. Redrow are committed to delivery of the development and will build immediately following the completion of the Section 106 and necessary discharge of conditions. In terms of flood attenuation storage as proposed on the site, and there have been no objections from Yorkshire Water or the Council's drainage officer subject to conditions. We will be prepared to answer any questions, and should members wish to invite the applicant to attend the private meeting, we will be happy to do so. Thank you, Chair.
Can I ask a question which may seem quite innocent to start with, but I notice on this master plan it says indicative route of storm sewer, which you can see on the green bit, but it's not clear where it goes after that. Can you enlighten us, please?
Through you, Chair. That is likely to be the line of the storm sewer, but you'll see from the officer report there is a condition requiring a further survey of the trees within the woodland in order to establish which are the trees which are the less valuable ones, and whichever ones are the less valuable trees can be taken out in order to allow the storm sewer to be, or the drain to be inserted or to be positioned.
I'm sorry, that wasn't the point I was making. It disappears under the road. And I just wonder where it joins up with existing sewers under existing roads, if you know that.
Yeah, through you, Chair. There is a plan which shows the drainage scheme. I don't have the plan to hand, but what I can say is that the way that the scheme would be drained is through essentially an attenuation tank, which is shown here. And in essence, what that means is you'd get a restricted discharge into the river, and then the water, if there was a heavy rainfall period, the water would then collect in the tank and then be discharged slowly into the river. There are plans showing exactly where the drains within the site are to be routed, but in any event, there's a condition requiring full details to be agreed.
Right, thank you. I have another question. What did the outline permission actually say about access? Does it fix one access, just one access at that point there? Or is there any scope for introducing other accesses? I'll carry on depending on the answer I get on that.
Through you, Chair. Well, the outline included the access, so essentially we considered where the access was going to go at outline stage, and we approved that position. The things internal to the site, they're the things that we can consider. So where the road goes after it comes off Stonybank Lane, they're what we can consider now. But we fixed that point of access at outline, or the council did. I think. Are you asking if there could be another access as well?
Well, I'll explain how I've come to that. I was very taken with the statement that Mr. Willock read out from, I don't know who it was or where they live, but what it boils down to is the gradient on the main estate road, it does seem to me that where we can avoid building estate roads that have got steep gradients, and therefore we all know what steep gradients can be prone to, all sorts of things. So that if one can build an estate without a steep road like that, and what I was thinking of was three roads going off Stonybank Lane, parallel to each other across the gradient, so that you've got rid of the slope. And now, is that feasible? I know it would probably mean refusing this, but
through you, Chair. I mean, I'll let my colleague in Highways come in shortly. I mean, what we've got is a scheme that we have to assess, rather than officers can't go back. Well, officers don't go back to the applicant and give other alternatives where the proposal that's before us is considered acceptable. So there aren't any objections from Highways. And as I say, the point of access has already been fixed. There's clearly an issue with viability on the scheme anyway, so I imagine that if additional roads were introduced, I suspect that the number of plots would have to be reduced, but I don't know, because that scheme's not before us. But I will let my colleague come in and just elaborate.
Thanks, Matt. Through you, Chair. The gradient of 1 in 7, that might be the existing gradient of the land, but actually the proposed finished gradients, the access road will be 1 in 25, internally 1 in 12, and at the turning head, near the top of the site, it will be 1 in 21. So it's well within our limits. 1 in 7 we would not accept, to be fair. Thank you, Chair.
A couple of questions before I just make a quick comment. One is space park buildings. Does all these properties achieve space park buildings?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's no issues as far as what the objector was saying about space park buildings between.
No, it meets the distances. Obviously, you've got to take into account topography as well and the heights of the buildings, but it does meet the spacing standards. That's right.
That's all I need to know. The other thing is, have we taken into consideration the boundary treatment, the fencing treatments? Because the police architectural liaison officer did raise some issues about that. What is the design of the fencing?
There is a plan submitted showing the boundary treatments. If it's not in the update, I take your point, Councillor, that officers might have to suggest that an additional condition be attached to any subsequent
that's
consent.
Conditional, please. Is that okay? The other issue is about PD rights. Can we ensure that all PD rights are taken away from these properties?
Through your Chair, we can amend the recommended condition to remove PD rights across the site rather than just confined to the properties which are in the report. So yeah, we could recommend that all PD rights be removed for extensions.
That's fine. Can I just make one quick comment then, Chair, please, before we go into viability? Well, before other people speak, and that's about starter homes. I think one objector, in particular, Councillor Patrick did say this, Starter homes are starter homes. They're not affordable homes. You get the discount for the first person that actually buys them. Down the line, they just go back to being normal properties. I don't think we are getting any affordable homes on this. Whether to actually target them as affordable homes, I think is misnomer. I think it is, if people are lucky enough to get 20% off their property, then that's fine. I don't know whether the sort of policy is that it allows us to do that, but is it? I don't think it's an issue as far as we're concerned. That we're not going to. We've got a particular problem. I listened to someone the other day about our housing list and whatever. This is not going to do anything with our housing list. We've got over 6,000 people wanting properties, so this isn't going to achieve anything for us. So I don't like the fact that this has been targeted as affordable homes. And that's just a comment. I'd like to sort of reserve some comments for the viability, if you don't mind, Chair.
Thanks, Chair. Well, carrying on from what Paul's just said, affordable homes, they're only affordable once, Your second time by asked to pay through nose. In the States, they use affordable homes out there, but they don't sell them. They lease them. And they can keep the leasing down as affordable for as long as they want to. And I think it's time that we started doing that as well, because the affordable properties to buy are only affordable once. Now, looking at the reconstituted stone, we did, as the Three Walk Council, ask for natural stone. Officers know this, and we've plumped for this reconstituted, well, I won't call it rubbish, but it's not very good, is it? Let's be fair. It doesn't even look like stone. And when it rains, it soaks it up like a sponge. It takes it about 3 days to dry out. Their state roads down this particular situation, looking at the plan, the width of their state roads are about, I should think about 1.5 meters, 2 meters wider than the original road that goes into their estate, which to me, it would have been far better if the planners who planned this estate had taken quite a few houses out, and at least where it's made it look sort of on balance. It's off balance. I still go on about natural stone. All the people who live down Stony Bank, and believe it or not, it's called Stony Bank for a reason, because most of the houses down there are built of stone. Their houses are going to look a little bit out of place, or somebody's going to look out of place with the reconstituted stone down there. It will be the first time that there's been any reconstituted stone in Stony Bank. Again, moving on to the sewage. Where does the sewage get extracted to? Do we know as a council? Do we know which position of the sewage is, which way it goes? Can you tell me, please?
Yes, Councillor. It would be subject to Yorkshire Water approval in terms of the connection to the combined sewer. And I don't have the details in front of me, but there are no objections from consultees. Yorkshire Water, I think, have said no objections. They've either said no objections to this one or the outline. So there aren't any objections to the sewage system. Is it the sewer rather than the surface water that you're referring to?
I am referring to the sewer, yeah. Why I make a point in this is because we've got problems. It's going to go down Stony Bank Road or Stony Bank Lane into Kirkbridge Lane, where the Tenterhill sewer goes. They've got a problem, because they've had 3 blockages down there because the sewer isn't big enough. And I think that will be probably the only way they can take it. Yorkshire Water know what's going on there because we've met with them. They're trying to sort it out. And if that's the way these sewers are going to go, we've got a hell of a problem, because you're going to put another 40-odd houses into the same sewer. You're going to finish with about 110, 120 houses into one sewer that just can't even take it. And I think, really, as officers of the council and planners, the first thing we need to look at, before we start coming up with any houses at all, is to find out what the infrastructure is of the sewers, the sewage situation, surface water drainage systems and highways before we get the infrastructure right. I keep saying this, get the infrastructure right, then put your buildings later. Don't put the cart before the horse, because it's got to a point now everybody's rushing to build all these houses, and there's going to be tears in a year or two. So it's going to come back to bite everybody, because we're going to get problems like we've already got in New Mill. And again, I've just told you, it's the 3 ward councillors that get dragged in on it every time. Nobody listens to us until it's too late. So just bear that in mind, please. Thank you.
I understand what you're saying about sewerage, but sewerage is a building regulations issue if it's to deal with the foul water issue. So it's not for us as a planning authority unless it's a combined sewer and surface water is going into it. So we do have to be careful around where our roles and jurisdictions lie there. In terms of affordable housing, just to move on to that point, starter homes were added to the definition of affordable homes. They are an affordable home. The council, in its interim affordable housing policy, which members have endorsed, accept that if we deliver 20% of affordable housing, it can include starter homes as one of those. So we have made a decision as a council on that. The issue of materials, it's a subjective judgment, but you aren't in a conservation area, but it's about what is the right character. So that's probably enough just to clarify those points before if members want to go into private session to discuss anything further. It's not about whether it's the answer, no, but it's to advise you members of where my advice is to you as representatives of the council, but it's to be fair and balanced as the planning authority to give fair advice. Where we can make issues, that's fair, fine, but where we aren't within our jurisdiction, I would advise you of that equally, councillors.
I think we've got to a stage where we do need to go into private session, look at the viabilities. So if I can ask people that aren't required in this room, if you can please leave and you'll be called back in. Not too long. Hope you're a little bit clearer, colleagues. Who wants to kick off? Councillor Kane.
Chair, can I actually move we approve this application? But in doing so, obviously, I raised a couple of issues previously about conditions, about the fencing and the PD rights being removed. Can we make sure that? Can I just say that looking at the valuations, that there is some discrepancies on there, and I think this, I think the development will take stone-cladded properties, and I think we should ensure that we maintain that, because we actually asked that outline time when we actually approved it at outline. And I would like to sort of move that we accept it, but it, as far as materials are concerned, is stone, is York stone.
Thanks, Chair. With that committee resolution, as the applicants have not put that forward, we would actually ask committee to defer the application for us to go back and discuss further with the applicants to see whether they would be willing to ensure that the natural stone is within the whole development, throughout the whole of the site. Thank you.
So it's been withdrawn by Councillor Kane. Councillor Firth, you're moving deferral, or are you saying? I'll move deferral. Seconded by Councillor Firth. Those in favour of deferring, please show. That's unanimous. 6-0. So that also rides over onto the other application at page 83. From page 83, we'll move up to page 103. And at page 103, this is the pre-application for Standard Drive, Crossland Hill, HD4. Bill Topping.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm Bill Toppin. I've been dealing with this pre-app inquiry. This is one you visited this morning. It's a pre-app inquiry for large-scale residential development on the Black Cat fireworks site and some surrounding land, which is also within the same ownership. Very large site, 22.8 hectares, fronts onto Black Norfolk Road, extends all the way up to Feltstyle Road. This is the golf club. This is Crossland Hill Road there, and this is Johnson's Quarry on the opposite side of the road. In terms of allocations on the UDP, it's the factory area, which is obviously a brownfield employment site, that is unallocated on the UDP. The green areas, this point here, next to Crossland Hill Road, and these fields here to Feltstyle Road, are provisional open land. The area to the north, which is shown better on this one here, the blue land, which is in the ownership, that's green belt. And if you remember, we saw the boundary, there's a fence which delineates the boundary there. On the emerging local plan, the whole of the red site there is allocated, or potentially allocated, as mixed use, which is residential and employment mixed use. Obviously the green belt area remains as green belt. For information, the neighbouring site where the caravans are for the caravan site, the caravan sales area, that is on the emerging local plan allocated as potential housing land as well. Yeah, so that's information for you. Proposal is, as I say, a large-scale residential scheme. Upwards of 695 houses have been mentioned. It's an indicative proposal at the moment, and in a second we'll ask the applicants to go through the master planning stage. You've got a report before you that indicates obviously what consultations we've had back thus far, and a range of issues which we will obviously hopefully discuss following the presentation in just a second. Just for your information, there has already been a consultation exercise, a public consultation exercise in back end of November last year. That fed into some amendments to the master plan that will be presented today. Obviously, following any comments and so on that you have today, there's going to be a final consultation exercise, which I believe is booked for the 23rd of January, and then obviously a final scheme will come in. So at that point, I shall invite Dominic to introduce the scheme to you. Thank you, Chair.
All right, thanks, Bill. So by way of introduction, my name is Dominic Page. I'm the lead planning consultant on the project. I'm here today with Andy Roberts, who's the project's lead master planner. Just briefly, in addition to what Bill's mentioned, I just thought I'd set out some of the background context to how this scheme's come forward, and then Andy's going to run through the sort of design rationale for the site and how the master plan has reached where it is as of today. So our first involvement with the landowner started about 10 months ago, and from the outset we've worked closely with the council both in terms of how the site could come forward as part of the planning application, but also in terms of how this site sits within the local plan process. As I'm sure you're aware, the draft allocation for the site is a mixed-use employment and residential allocation, and from the outset we've taken the position that employment uses on this site are not going to be viable in terms of market interest or in terms of actual financial deliverability for redeveloping the site. We've carried out some market testing and have provided the council with evidence to support that position as part of the pre-application process, and further work is being done to actually support the application in due course. As a result, we're sort of twin-tracking two processes, and I won't speak any more about the local plan process today, but in terms of how the application has come forward, we've focused very much on a residential-led scheme for the site, which we consider to be a good use of a brownfield site in a sustainable location on the edge of an existing settlement. So I think Bill mentioned just previously that we're looking at around 695 units. The latest master plan actually proposes up to 700 homes. Included within that is up to 70 extra care apartments, which I think Andy will touch on shortly. So there's a split of 630 houses and 70 care apartments. That was sort of formed the basis of the original proposal for the site. We've obviously done a full raft of technical works to support the application, and as Bill mentioned, we recently went through our first public consultation event just before Christmas, which was well attended by approximately 130 people, and we've taken away from that some of the key comments relating to, in particular, the sort of transport issues around the site, the type of housing that we're proposing, and also the sort of accessibility to local services, whether it be shops, schools, health services, etc. So the latest master plan has taken those comments on board, has been amended to include a small local convenience store, but we'll be applying for it as a dual-use facility, so it could come forward as a shop or a local service, so a sort of a potential mix of uses there. And we've also rejigged the overall layout of the master plan, again, which Andy will touch on shortly. So we're due to have a second public consultation later this month on the 23rd, and finishing off our technical work, we should be due to submit the application hopefully around the middle of February. That's our current sort of timeline. So I think at that point, if I hand over to Andy and he'll run you through the master plan.
Thank you. I'll try and rattle through the front end of this presentation, but I think a site of this size warrants quite a considerable amount of baseline technical work, particularly on the landscape impact and visual impact issues. So the slide you'll see above you here starts to look at the different character areas of the site itself. If you've been out to site today, you'll see that it consists of a brownfield portion of land, and also to the west. So this is obviously the main brownfield portion of the site. To the west, this is agricultural fields. We have this sort of area to the north of the site, which actually lies within the green belt, which sits on the crest of the sort of hillside. And is used for sort of recreational routes and grazing. And then we have this area here, which is adjacent to the existing settlement, which consists of fields. Bill, if you could have the next slide, please. Oh, right. Perfect. Thank you. Thanks. In terms of the visual impact of the site, we have looked extensively, not just about the views around the immediate vicinity of the site and the footpath, but also right the way across from the other side of the valley. So you'll see here, this is the site. So we've done a lot of short-range views, but the red blobs you'll see on the plan are conservation areas. So we actually looked at all the views from the conservation areas and from the other side and the higher ground to the northwest. And we will show the impacts of development on all those views. Just some examples of the pictures, some site photographs which were taken. Again, a range of views from the immediate vicinity of the site, adjacent where there's some listed buildings, and these are from the sort of southern areas looking back towards the ridge line. And you know, our view here is that actually there is this sort of ridge line at the top, which is the northern extent of the site, is the one where we really need to concentrate in terms of design principles and making sure we've got a really high quality design. Just a plan which shows the sort of accessibility, overall accessibility of the site and how sustainable it is. A lot of facilities obviously lie to the east, there's some to the north, and actually a key part of this master plan is to create a permeable network of routes and actually connect up the footpaths. So you've got a lot of footpaths which run all around here. Our sort of proposals is to actually connect and create routes which connect through the site to those footpaths. Just zooming into the site level, there are quite a few technical constraints associated with the site. Obviously, partly the fact it was a fireworks site, but also we have a sort of 40-metre level change which falls that way, and levels fall sort of this way as well. This, as you can see, is the ridge line here, and there's a number of sort of stone walls which cross the site. We've done all the sort of necessary technical works which support this. So just to sort of try and identify some of our high-level design principles, really important for us to create this permeability and connectivity right the way through to the existing community. So you'll see these big green arrows here are the sort of connections that we think would be reasonable connections through the site, particularly as the road from the south comes in and actually sort of connecting through to this network and right the way to the northwest. The way that the site is will mean that in terms of drainage is quite important, given that all the levels, the 40-metre level change, all the water is going to be falling across the site. We need to create some large sort of green spaces for water retention to ensure that there's no impact on the surrounding residential areas. Also, the edges of the site are quite important, how we respond to each of the edges. So we've got a rural edge here, a very visible edge on this side. We've got some more urban edges here, but particularly we've got some listed buildings on this side. So again, we need to respond to each of those edges. Just trying to flip this through. Seems to be stalling here, Bill. I don't know where that... Oh, right, sorry. There we go, sorry. So I'm just going to identify just a couple of the options that were presented to the consultation session. We actually put two different options forward. The difference in these options are effectively in how the layout works. So the option on the right here creates a series of sort of terraces. A really important factor for this for us is to actually not have lots of retaining walls which crisscross this site. We think it would look particularly bad and impact on the environment and also the visual impact. So we've tried to work with the levels. The option on the right creates a series of terraces and a gradual stepping in all the levels. And actually what's quite nice is we draw all the sort of landscape back into the site, into a series of sort of linear bands. And these can be used for drainage, etc., surface water drainage. You can collect the drainage throughout the site. And again, it's a very, very familiar pattern throughout the local area, this stepping with the changes in level. Both these options identify this sort of blob of extra care apartments within the corner. Also, within both schemes, we look for two accesses off the two different road interfaces here, and that is an advantage in terms of phasing of development, etc. We also retain in a huge area of open space to the northwest. Part of that obviously lies within Greenbelt, but the proposal is to make this, improve the recreational value of this area, so improvements to footpaths, and potentially putting in a very sort of soft landscape play area within the sort of quarry area where the hand is at the top of the site. So significant improvements to the open space within the area. We've also left on both these options quite a significant buffer space between the existing sort of conservation area and development and the development on this side. And again, the idea is that we're responding to distant views. So again, we're trying to open up the open spaces around that edge so that you create a very varied roofscape. What we don't want is how, if you look to the sort of this side of the plan, there's a series of ridge, sort of 1960s, 70s houses with long ranges of ridges of roof lines, and we think it's important to sort of break that up, vary it, and step with the levels. So from these two plans, we actually came up with an option following the consultation session, which responded to some of those points within the consultation session. Firstly, we originally showed a connection and a route going back into the village from this location, and clearly that route was found to be, it's not actually a public right-of-way. So we re-angled our sort of main connection on this axis to the top of the site and created a linear park all the way through, which actually worked really well because it connects the sort of extra care scheme right the way through to site into the footpath network. We also tried to combine some of the benefits of the other schemes, so actually creating some green routes which cross into the landscaped play area on this location. We've introduced here, where we've got a big sort of area of green or a village green, the potential for some local shops or local shop rather within this location. Again, the pub is here, so it creates a nice little focal point as people are driving through this location. I also have some potential images of the types of sort of things that we're proposing in the development. So this linear park, which was built, that we would redesign through to a country park. This actually starts formal, becomes very informal, and this would obviously have development either side of it. And just some precedent examples of landscape areas of play which could be introduced without having any real impact on the greenbelt and actually work with the sort of landscape character of the site and be a community asset rather than just a sort of bog standard approach to play. And again, just some precedent images of high quality development, housing which sort of steps with the levels. We're not specifying at this stage whether this is a contemporary or a traditional design, but we are going to set some really important design principles as part of this outline submission. Thank you.
Right. Yeah. Dominic, Andy, thanks for that. Looking at it, a lot of good things in it I like. Extra care, community park, green areas. Colleagues, got any comments, any questions, Carol?
Thank you, Chair. I did go along to the consultation. I made some comments there, but I'll make them again here. And that is, I'm quite happy to see some development on this site. I mean, I think that's a given. I do like the extra care, and I do like the shop or other community facilities. I'm not so sure that one is enough. I think maybe a bit more than that, but because it is a small village, this. I mean, it's 700 houses in a small village. But the issue, of course, is highways. And it isn't just the local roads, it is further down, as the report says, down at Longroy Bridge. Because whether you take the traffic from there, or however you take the traffic from there, whether it goes down Feltstyle Lane or down Blackmore Foot Road, it ends up on Manchester Road, which itself is all right, but it's Longroy Bridge where it's trying to get into Huddersfield, which is a really big issue at the moment, and it'll be even bigger with another 700 houses. I hope it can be resolved. I find it difficult to think how it can be resolved, but I do hope we can find a way, but I think it's going to be very, very difficult. I think need to direct the traffic possibly actually away from that Longroy Bridge junction to other ways into Huddersfield, but or even, if I dare say, away from Huddersfield itself and off to Manchester. If you were looking at possibly getting commuters, because there is there is the railway line along there as well, and if you're actually sort of possibly even, some of this was marketed towards commuters from Manchester by train, not by car. There is the possibility of moving some of that away from our roads network and to Meltham, Marsden, other places like that. But Slathwaite, yes, being the nearest train station, that would be good. But I hope a solution can be found to the highways issue.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd like to follow on from that, because that's one of the points I was going to make, that some people will live here and want to work in Manchester, or probably already do work in Manchester. And the way of getting to there, without going through Huddersfield, is to use that awful road up to Longroyd. I forget the name with the cobblestones. Dobley, yes, which is a dreadful road to drive on, but is the only way of getting to the M62 without going through the centre of Huddersfield. If you can find, I know it's way off site, but I think given the amount of development potentially on Blackmorefoot Road, not just this site but St Luke's Hospital and the other one, that's something that I think needs to be looked at in conjunction with highways on a sort of macro level. The other point I wanted to make is in relation to this extra care facility. I'm a ward member in Cleckheaton, where we've just got permission for a McCarthy and Stone development, which includes an extra care facility and other houses for people in a separate development. And I certainly think that in relation to council-owned land in the new plan, we should be looking at trying to develop for purposes like this. But I do just wonder whether you could give over part of the site there near the extra care home to houses for people, you know, like McCarthy and Stone's model, or the Roundtree development in York, where it's treated as a whole, a whole community, and of course that would have the tendency to reduce slightly the traffic impact. And Steve's going to disagree with this, at least partly, but because we've been arguing about that in relation to another site elsewhere. But it does seem to me that there is an acknowledged need for accommodation of that kind to be offered at any rate. I'm not saying I would necessarily want to live in that sort of place.
Across the road.
Oh, yeah, well, right. but you can see the advantages of it if you can adapt part of the site to that purpose. Yeah.
Well, in capacity, sort of transportation capacity, there's no real silver bullet for this size of development. It's a suite of measures. There's a suite of improvement measures throughout the district in that locality. In terms of the Lockwood Bar Junction, there's currently a bid for the improvement of that. Transportation colleagues are currently drawing up an improvement scheme, but it's not just when you release traffic at that junction, it's junctions beyond that. The transportation colleagues are working with your highways consultant at the moment in terms of applying your development traffic onto the Saturn model, I understand, within the area. And it's only until we understand where the traffic flows are and the demands but we can actually start putting further measures in at the Park Lane junction. There's a signalised junction a little bit further down near St Luke's. That's to be taken into consideration. And obviously, as you mentioned, there's a railway, there's a train station. It's about what other modes of transport we can promote from this. And also about, as you mentioned, there's a shop. It's about what the internalisation within the site, because it's a large site. It's about keeping people on site in terms of a shop and such, and not having to commute to do the daily shop. So in respect to that, it's only until we get what the development outputs are till we start trying to influence the movement of traffic. So, but obviously ongoing dialogue with our transportation colleagues.
Thanks, Chair. There's a couple of points, and I'm going to touch upon the traffic issues, and we all know this. Our roads are blocked up anyway, and whatever we do, we can't win. There is something here, though, that 7.9, it's a strategic scheme. They need to be modelled an impact on significant junctions, and you're going to obviously you'll take them into consideration. I don't want to dwell on too much on that. There's one thing I would ask you about contamination, and is there's the phase 1 and phase 2 contamination being requested. Have you commenced that as yet? Is it completed? And it's completed. So we haven't had an observation of that or whatever. Can I just touch upon one point? And I have to say this: it's not exactly a garden city, is it? But it's a big application. It's a garden village. Yes, it's a big application, isn't it? So it's it's a blank sheet. It's a blank sheet, is this? And seriously, we should be looking at things that, and not putting costs into this, but things where you put thoughts into it. You did say about interesting designs. There's some interesting designs in there. Other things I'd like you to take into consideration really is about the very fact is about energy efficiency. So again, the positioning of these properties, ensuring that it maximises the direction of the sun and whatever. And lifetime homes in particular. A lot of people, it's a massive investment as a home. So we need to ensure that it could be there, home for life. I doubt whether it is, but definitely there's a possibility that we get the lifetime homes and we get whatever we can out of that. Obviously, there's other things as well about working from home. And when you're designing these properties, that there is sufficient space there available for people to work from home and reducing commuting and all the other issues, healthy living and whatever, as much as we possibly can. But in particular about local provision, I think you did say something about a shop. There was a comment made earlier, whether it's a big store or a small store. It's not so much the store itself, it's what it provides at the end of the day. And it's, we've really got to think about doctors and dentists and other chemists' provision in that sort of area, so people are definitely not having to move out when they don't have to move out. I'm not saying that people should live in their properties 24/7. I'm not saying that at all, because the very fact that you're looking at other things and being able to occupy their minds in other ways and whatever, that's really, really important. But we need to make it so as they don't have to travel into Huddersfield and ensure that everything they can get is there. And as I say, it's a blank sheet, is this? So you really need to be looking at them things, and that would be the sort of thing that I would be looking at when this comes back. Because we do have a golden opportunity. I know you've been here most of the day, and the fact is when we actually look at the outline application, I know they'll be split up, will these? They'll all be, it might be 4, 5 and 6 different applications, but as a general rule, you're going to come back and we'll have a look at them at that particular time. And I'd like to say, and Councillor Firth said this, is that looking at outline now, we really need to look at some of the bigger issues instead of just access and whatever. And design is one of the things that we should be looking at. So I'm in support of it. I think it's a fantastic use of that piece of land. The land is a lovely piece of land, and it's going to cost a hell of a lot to bring it back into some sort of usage. So I support everything that you're trying to do here, but let's have a look at it the longer term and, you know, build something that we can all be proud of. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Well, looking at this plan, it's big enough, in actual fact, to its own self-supporting village, in actual fact. Like the idea of probably having its own school, its own dentist, doctor's surgery, even probably a small public house, but more certainly, as they've got a retail unit, it doesn't look very big to me, that retail unit, but that could be looked at in the future and probably made bigger. But yes, everything could be there on the site. You've got a great idea here. You can expand on that idea, and really it can be its own small town, if you like. It's big enough to be. And self-sufficient. They wouldn't have to go so far if you got everything on board, would they? Anybody that lived there. It's fine. Gets my support. Thank you.
Any more questions, comments? No? All I can say is one of the things is that we have an extra care home in Etmond White, which has got a room set aside for doctors' visits and that kind of stuff on a property, an area of land that's this big. As other colleagues have said, you know, it really is worth looking at, because let's face it, it's a fair old walk out of Huddersfield, even from O'Farrell. So, you know, the more stuff that can be catered for up on that site without people having to get taxis, buses, jumping cars, whatever, is well worth looking for, and I'm totally in favour of it, David.
Thanks, Chair. It was just to open it up for the committee. We've got a lot of useful comments there, and just whether you had further comments on heritage issues, drainage, environmental or biodiversity. I know they're centred around highways and urban design, but it's just whether you had those as well. Of course you will, Councillor Firth.
Fog, because it's high up. Agenda item 19 now. We've paid a visit this morning. Stadium Way, John Smith Stadium, HD1.
Just ask Councillor Carr to come down first and just make some comments, Councillor Carr, before we do these applications.
Shall I start? Right. Thank you, Chair. As you know, I'm a Dalton Ward councillor. Residents of Rawthorpe, Springbank and Town Estate have raised a few concerns with myself, and although they have valid points and I fully empathise with them, given the economic and leisure opportunities this investment brings to Huddersfield, it would be wrong for me not to support this development. However, we are constantly dealing with a number of issues in the area, such as littering, illegal trading, illegal parking, disputes over parking between residents and football fans, and the impact on residents' ability to park on their own streets during match days in both Rawthorpe and the Dalton Estate. My concern is that this development would further confound these problems, as well as create a few new ones. Some of the concerns have been raised in general to do with the congestion, air quality. Bradley Mills Road is a very narrow road, and the loss of a play area on the town estate. The car park, residents have also reported that the car park would have an overbearing impact on Town Avenue and potentially create disturbance in terms of light and noise pollution. I want to confirm that this application ensures that the factors that affect residents are adequately mitigated against, and the developers continue to engage in dialogue with residents with the view to offering support, possibly in terms of employment opportunities, a new play area, and some sort of support that allows residents to be able to afford access to the proposed leisure and entertainment on the new complex, and other factors such as tree screening, perhaps. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Louise Bearcroft and I'm the case officer who's been looking at this pre-application inquiry. So it's a pre-application inquiry for a reserve matters application at John Smith Stadium, Huddersfield, for a multi-use leisure and entertainment development with a hotel. This follows a recent grant of planning permission to extend the time limit of an earlier 2000 outline application. So the site is approximately 11 hectares and extends to the east and south of Leeds Road. Access is from the north of Bradley Mills Road via roundabout, or to the south from Stadium Way. And within the site currently is a surface car park for the stadium, existing leisure uses, golf driving range and some open undeveloped areas. So the pre-application inquiry seeks comments on details of layout and appearance for this future reserve matters application. The master plan has been amended from that which was indicatively proposed at outline stage. The key changes are the relocation of the hotel from the southern part of the site to the west of the river, together with the erection of a multi-storey car park. These buildings replace proposed retail and leisure units. Residential development is no longer proposed, and revisions have been made to the position of the leisure and retail units in the southern part of the site. The access road will follow a path adjacent to the river, and the leisure, restaurant and retail units will be located on the upper plateau of the site, to the south of the stadium where the car park currently is. So the applicant will present a presentation, but members are invited for their views on the impact of the scheme on visual amenity and landscape character, the impact on residential amenity, in particular that would arise from the scale and mass of the car park, highway safety matters, flood risk or drainage matters, environmental issues like air quality, contamination, health and safety, and ecological matters. Thank you, Chair.
Good afternoon. My name is Carl Gray. I'm from the Harris Partnership. We're the architects on behalf of the client in HC1. The scheme has gone through some quite dramatic design evolution since the outline planning permission, and this has been in conjunction with the client team and occupiers for the site, including the Snowflex dry slope ski slope, which forms an important part of the leisure scheme. As Louise stated earlier, we've redesigned and reconfigured some of the site to create a stronger leisure core as part of this scheme. So all the leisure accommodation now sits at the southern portion of the site, next to the stadium, on what is currently the car park and the driving range sites. The hotel and a multi-storey car park are relocated to the northern site, which is just to the east of the river, opposite the stadium. The relocation of the hotel also was in discussion with the stadium operators, and to create a stronger link between the hotel offer and the stadium in terms of conferencing and things, and promote activity there. But we felt that it provided a more sensitive use next to the residential areas rather than restaurants and leisure use on that site. As you can see, the ski slope is designed to use the existing Kilner Bank embankment. We plan to modify some of the topography on that embankment, clear some trees and bring the ski slope down into the centre of the site, creating a external plaza space we've termed the village, which will be surrounded by restaurants overlooking that space. The ski centre then has a beginner slope, which is sat on top of a leisure scheme below, and there's other leisure uses and small retail associated with the leisure use within the scheme on that southern area of the site. There's a visitor car park as well on what is the eastern end of the driving range site at the moment. The existing access off Stadium Way is retained. This forms a new entrance into the site for public up onto the leisure scheme, which is, as you probably know, the site at the moment. The car park is elevated from the access road. The leisure development will be built at that higher level with step and ramp access around from the south. There's also access from the north, which I'll touch on later. The access road then from Stadium Way links the visitor car park and around the access road towards the stadium itself. Sorry. Can I do it from here? Thanks. We included some views just to get across the intention of the scheme. This is a view from inside the village square, so looking up the ski slope. There's restaurants surrounding that space, so it's a multifunctional space that we'll provide in there. There's no vehicle access at this point, it's all pedestrian access, and so there's scope then for restaurants to have outdoor seating. The space itself is large enough to promote events and activity within there, including shelter and areas of soft landscaping. The ski slope itself is an open-air ski slope, so that forms the heart of this development, and the idea is the square then, it has optimum views of that space, and then a double-height ski centre overlooks the square, but also the snow slope itself, and that forms a visual anchor, which then links to the plaza back down to Stadium Way. A view from the top of the ski slope looking back towards the development, just to emphasise the relationship of this new square, the stadium and the ski slope itself. We've got the beginner slope and the snow centre, so it's all visually all designed to sort of interlink in terms of the spaces and the integration between the leisure activities. So the master plan itself, we have the main leisure scheme and the ski slope on the southern portion of the site, the car park and the hotel on the northern site. We've got the visitor parking at the southern end, which will provide 300 spaces for visitor spaces for the leisure scheme. The car park on the northern site will provide 500 parking spaces within there. But also linked with this development is a gasworks site, which is temporary car park at the moment, which we've put in place early through a temporary permission for parking for the stadium on match days as part of the Premiership improvements. Part of the development of this scheme will include bringing that site forward as a permanent car park, and that will provide circa 1,200 spaces. To put that into perspective, the site currently has 1,005 spaces. So in terms of providing match day parking, a similar amount is on gasworks, and then we've got the parking, the new 500 space car park and 300 space visitor centre on site itself. Another aerial shot just to highlight how we've looked at utilising some of the levels for this site. As you're aware, there's considerable level difference on that southern area, and we're retaining the upper level plaza for reasons of contaminated ground that's in there, so that level retains, and we'll build the leisure scheme on top of that level. And then the lower level access road, we introduced some restaurant uses around the main stadium access area, the link to the car park, and then this link provides coach parking area for match days, and on non-match days there'll be 70 parking spaces off the access road in that position. Similar principle to how the stadium operates at the moment, and the surface car park and coach parking that's there at present. So a plan of the lower ground area and the new access road. the new sort of restaurant unit and car parking area linking round to the stadium and access to the car park. All this is then at the higher level. As part of the proposal for the access road, we've moved the access road north slightly, closer to the river. So there is some works to the existing embankment need to be done. So there'll be some new enhanced landscape, soft landscaping going back, new tree planting, new native species to enhance that riverside corridor. And part of which is to maintain the riverside walkway, which will now follow the access road across that riverside corridor, which we've looked to define in a bound gravel surface, so it reads differently to the rest of the development, and it's retained as a riverside walkway. And we've introduced sort of seating areas within the new woodland planting that we put back in there. Moving then to the upper ground level, which is this raised area with the leisure scheme, we have the yellow areas are leisure units, so it would be sort of bowling, that sort of leisure operation. You have the ski slope and the ski centre. The orange are restaurant units that surround this new public space with a new plaza that connects the two to Stadium Way. The red are retail operations, which will be sort of the outdoor retail type operators, which link then with the use of the leisure. And then this is the upper level where we've got a beginner ski slope which sits above the bowling unit and some upper level accommodation to some of the leisure operators surrounding that square, which, as you can see, from internally then they provide views out from terraces and from the glazed areas over the new spaces that are created. Some elevations which formed part of the submission material, which aren't particularly clear on the overhead, but it's the elevation across the lower level. We look to use a natural stone to create a plinth around the scheme. So the scheme sort of is bedded into the site a little bit with a local vernacular. That's again, I realise that's quite a hot topic from the last presentation. But yeah, we see that the use of the natural stone then, because of this level change that we're looking to create, we can use that to form around the steps and the entrance areas to the site and identify that in the Huddersfield context. And then the upper levels around this, we integrate some of this natural stone into the separation between the units along that plaza to the square, where it's integrated with more contemporary materials, where we've got the standing seam and the ceramic granite surrounds to the shop fronts themselves. The upper levels, where we use the standing seam materials, we've got a mix there between solid and perforated materials around the ski slopes, so we can use lighting in there as well behind those surface materials to provide some animation and activity for this leisure development. The northern site, with the car park and the hotel, one of the benefits of relocating these uses to this site is meant we can, compared to some of these outline illustrative schemes that we saw earlier in the outline applications, we can split the built form on that site and reduce the density of there and provide a stronger link through across the existing bridge to the stadium. But one thing coming about from discussions with the planning officers and the design officers was a desire line to promote a link through to the Bradley Mills residential area to the north. So we've since probably the plans you saw initially, we've compacted the floor plate of the car park and moved that south and created this desire line and a link through. So we get a larger landscape buffer on the northern edge, which we'd look to include some tree planting screen within that landscape buffer along there to enhance the amenity for the residents. But it does also mean we can create quite a strong desire line through in that space. There is also a connection with a car park through to the zone, which provides a community operation run by the stadium. That links in with then the ski slope and the stadium itself and everything else to provide activity in this leisure destination. And the hotel access with all the bedroom, all ground floor amenity is restaurant, sort of bar accommodation, all the bedrooms located above. The northern site is, we've looked at quite closely in terms of flood mitigation, and especially with the hotel. Both buildings are designed around 1 in 1,000 year flood mitigation. So the hotel level, ground floor level is outside of that 1 in 1,000 year. The scheme is designed to flood underneath the building in voids from the riverside. So there's points of safety and the building levels designed in account of that. This is a view looking back towards the stadium through this link that we've created through the site, where we've got the entrance to the car park area and the hotel. So we've created an access terrace within that, so you get the visible connection to the stadium from this point, and then through to the residential area beyond. We've got the tree planting screen as part of the soft landscaping buffer, which then we open up towards the hotel to promote views through. As part of the car park design, we've also looked at introducing a green wall screen on the first 2 stories. So for sort of dwelling proportions, looking out, there's a green screen on that lower level, so it just enhances that landscape view as you're looking across from the residential area. View from the pedestrian bridge moving across, looking back towards the terrace between the hotel building and the multi-storey car park. This is a sort of aspirational view that we set up from the area of parkland and what is currently car park in between the residential and the scheme, just to highlight the scale and the separation of the 2 buildings in comparison to the space, and also promoting the link through. That then sort of starts to provide opportunity for it's not within the realms of this application, but this area then that can start to hopefully be brought forward. There's a potential for it to be used more as people walk through to the new leisure development. So it brings into play this area of land between the dwellings. A section through there, looking from the stadium, the river and the car park and the dwellings. The face of the car park is now 33 metres from the nearest dwelling, and for the boundary we introduced this tree-lined edge, a double-storey green wall, so within that landscaped buffer, and then we've raised up and there's the area of parkland before the next dwelling. The landscape enhancements also included on the riverside, between the views from the stadium and across the river. Okay. An elevation of the car park, just identifying the green screen, which we'll use, which will be a mesh system on the car park, which will include planting at ground level, which is allowed to grow up to the first 2 stories of the building. So materials we'll look to use across the site, natural stone to create this plinth and this feature material running through the site. And then contemporary materials around the leisure development in standing seam, ceramic granites and sort of different curtain wall glazing system, using some timber type laminate cladding just to provide that warmth and feel against the stone. And also looking at using, we've got the green screen on the car park, so the perforated cladding to allow ventilation, but a visual screen to cars beyond, and then brickwork and sort of flat cladding to those rear areas which are out of visibility. There's a landscape strategy which forms part of this proposal, which, as I've touched on, identifies the river corridor, but also in terms of planting and treatment to the embankment as we build a ski slope, new tree planting around the perimeter of the embankment, so the putting back as we remodel the slope to create the ski area, a new planting around the bottom of the embankment, around where we've introduced retaining walls for the car park area, and then again the landscape strategy for the northern site, which we've touched on, to do with screening and the river corridor. So external materials introducing are high quality concrete paving materials to create interest in these large square areas, a lighter appearance material. Street furniture, we are looking at using large format, sort of semi-permanent, if you like, street furniture, rather than any bespoke planters or smaller street furniture. There's, as you can expect with this site, there's a strong interest in counter-terrorism, the movement of people. So through that square and the plaza area, there's various widths we need to maintain. We can't afford any loose furniture for explosion and vandalism, things like that. So it's a very constrained site in that respect. So street furniture is key. It has to be robust. It has to be located in the right place. So that's a consideration we're currently going through with the stadium and their police liaison officers at the moment. So finish with some of the earlier shots, the master plan and the shots through the main leisure scheme. Thank you very much.
Sorry, thank you. I mean, I'm totally in favour of the HD1 proposal, but what I'm totally not in favour of is moving the hotel to that position and that car park. And I mean, I think it'll be bad because I think it detracts from the town estate. I think it's taking away. Town estate's already lost enough play area there. I mean, there are a lot of kids that live on that estate. I don't think the little ribbon is sufficient to provide the leisure, well, not leisure, but the kickabout facilities and things like that the kids on there need. I think the hotel and the car park itself will overshadow the estate. I don't even know. I mean, because once upon a time, we didn't want to open up the town estate to the football stadium. We tried to have, I mean, the natural barrier of the river and walls between it so that people couldn't go from town estate to the stadium and vice versa, because we don't want hordes of football fans parking there. I mean, they're not allowed to park there, but parking there and walking through there on match days. I don't know if that sort of feeling has changed at all, but it certainly was meant to be sort of protected from the stadium. I'm not so sure that I think the idea of the hotel being further down as well, where it was originally suggested, means that it's more accessible, to people in the town and to the university. I think putting it here by the stadium, I can see, opens it up for as a conference venue or complements the stadium as a conference venue. But I can see that I can't see anybody else wanting to use it then, other than the stadium. I mean, university is too far away from the university, too far away from the town. Certainly for any people that might want to just come here as tourists to Huddersfield, I don't think they will want to stay in a hotel which is right up in a squash between a retail park and the stadium and a residential estate. The other thing is that at the moment that strip of land, albeit it's a bit scrappy, provides a lot of car parking for people going to the swimming pool, to the leisure centre, to the cinemas, and also to the retail park. There's a lot of and it's free, and so people park there. I mean, I'm presuming that the multi-storey will be is less accessible than that current parking arrangement, and won't be free. It detracts from what is already there. And takes away, I think, quite a bit of parking, especially since the retail park has recently expanded and we've lost a lot of car parking from there anyway. Albeit it's not always full, but it's still an amenity that is being lost. So, I mean, I'm happy with the whole design, except that the movement of the hotel to and the car park. I just think it's in the wrong place, basically.
Can I ask Louise? I did make a point of about the car parking, the total car parking. Did you get the answer to the question?
Through you, Chair, I think it was mentioned in the presentation. There's 1,005 current spaces, and the multi-storey would provide about 500, and the visitor car parking space would provide about 300, combined with the coach parking up there. Thank you.
So in total, these 1,500 parking spaces, approximately?
There's, within the site, the multi-storey is 500 plus the 300, and then there's obviously the other town centre car park.
It's not a lot, is it? But I honestly don't know what the calculation would be if, as and when, you know, there must be a calculation somewhere to be a Premiership football team that you have so many car parking spaces, or if it's within some planning policy or whatever. And I honestly don't know. Whatever happens, there's never going to be enough car parking spaces, and it's blatantly obvious that I went to watch Huddersfield in the new year, and to be quite honest with you, it took me nearly 45-50 minutes to travel 200 yards on Leeds Road, and it was just absolutely horrendous. And so whatever happens as far as that goes. But I think some of the points what were raised by Carol is right, is that at the end of the day you've still got an housing estate at the side of there, albeit a very small one, and you've got to be it's not big in the scheme of things, it's not small then, but it's there is issues around that, and ensuring that these people, they've had to put up with a lot already, and now they're encroaching into invariably what is their own space, if you like. As far as we're always going, and planners are anyway, they're always seen as being killjoys. So, and I don't want to be a killjoy in this, because it's a good scheme, and I want it to be successful, and I want it to be successful for Huddersfield. The fact is that obviously sometimes it creates problems, and we want to mitigate them as much as we possibly can. Can I just ask, there seems to be, I don't know, I'm talking as a builder me more than anything else now, there seems to be a lot of flat roofs on there. Is that correct? Or is it an illusion?
They are pitched.
Are they pitched? Yeah.
Pitches you would see behind parapets.
Yeah.
The main area is actually the ski slope.
Yeah. Well, if you put the pointer to the other side, on the other side of there.
So we've got lower level restaurants.
Yeah.
The square, and then these two are larger leisure units. The roofs are pitched to fall.
The only reason I'm saying, if they are flat, is there not an option to get some car park on the top of them or whatever? It's it's like the levels. But engineering wise, it's possible. Whatever happens, everything's possible. And that is,
One of the constraints we looked at there is there's a overhead power line which comes across the side there, which it made any sort of provision of those any meaningful building have in this location very tricky.
Isn't there a gas main as well?
There's a gas main which runs through the site effectively, so there
easy, is it? No. I don't think I need to say much more. I think we're in support of it. It's just the effect on the surrounding area and surrounding people.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, generally speaking, I support this. I tend to agree with what Carol was saying about the location of the hotel, though, which maybe given all that you've said, there isn't anywhere else you could put it. The only thing that worries me is it future-proofed? Is the stadium big enough? No, I think is the answer. Because given the size of this stadium in comparison with a lot of others in the Premier League, it's extremely small. And I just wonder whether, if the pressure arises for it to be enlarged, what would that do to the rest of the scheme? Is there enough room to enlarge the stadium?
That's something I can't answer at the moment, I'm afraid. But yeah, we are working closely with the client and the stadium team, and that's something there's nothing in the pipeline to suggest that the stadium is to be extended.
Right, colleague, Carol.
Sorry, just can I ask about the car parking? Can the multi-storey, or can the existing car parking in front of the cinema and the leisure centre become multi-storey instead of putting it there?
Unfortunately, not. The area of car parking in front of the cinema and the gym that's there at the moment is that has to remain, and we have to retain the no. It's outside of our demise on this one. There's various tenancy agreements and things involved with that side of the site and the cinema that we can't, unfortunately. That's part of the site we can't develop.
Who owns that piece of land? Where the hotel and
it's KSDL.
Right. Are we happy with that? Right. Thank you. Thanks for coming in. Next, finally, last agenda item, page 123. This is our old friend, Washpit Mills. Adam.
Thank you, Chair. Adam Walker, I'm the case officer on this pre-application inquiry. So this inquiry is regarding the redevelopment of the Washpit Mill site in Home Firth. The background to this is that there was an application for a mixed-use scheme on the site which was dismissed by the Planning Inspectorate last year. That was following an appeal against non-determination. This committee had considered that scheme back in April last year as part of the appeal process and had resolved to inform the Planning Inspectorate that the Council would have refused the application. That was on the basis of the poor connectivity between the site and Home Firth. The Inspector dismissed the appeal on the basis of the potential highway impacts and the connectivity for pedestrians. In summary, the appeal inspector found that there would be an increase in traffic movements associated with that development over and above the established industrial use of the site. And there was uncertainty as to the degree to which this increase would impact on the local highway network. The inspector also considered that there were limitations with the site's connectivity for pedestrians and access to public transport links, and raised concerns with the mitigation measures that had been put forward by the developer, which were changes to Washpit New Road. In terms of this pre-app inquiry, it's been subject of discussions with officers and ward members, and the quantum of residential development has been amended on the back of those discussions. These discussions have also resulted in advice to the developer regarding which junctions within the vicinity of the site should be assessed as part of a future application. So this is the proposed site plan as it stands on this inquiry. The proposal is for 51 houses on the site. The previous application was for 61 units, which were a mixture of houses and apartments. This is purely houses now. The principal, well, this is a listed building. This is the principal listed building on the site. Under the previous application, that was due to be extended and turned into a 23-bed hotel. Now it won't be extended. It will be used as a private gym for residents of Washpit Mills only. The carding shed business is still part of the scheme in this part of the site. That involves car storage and workshop and a cafe shop and office space. Doesn't include a function room and separate bar. I'll just quickly show so that's showing the layout of the oil can cafe or the carding shed business, car storage, the IK Classics, which is maintenance of cars, shop, cafe area, and some office space downstairs. There's no longer offices as part of the scheme. Originally, this part of the site was going to be some small office space. There'd now be 4 townhouses and an additional mill building, which was to be retained and converted to apartments, which was this part of the site. That's to be demolished and would be, and 2 houses would be put in place of it. Now, this plan shows the proposed improvements to Washpit New Road to improve connections between the site and public transport links on Dunford Road and access down into Home Firth. There will be a footway along from the site all the way up to Dunford Road on one side of the road. It would vary in width from 900 millimetres to 1.2 metres. Previously, it was just proposed to have a white line demarking an area where pedestrians could walk, and the planning inspector had raised concerns that there wasn't a physical barrier between pedestrians and oncoming vehicles, so that would discourage use of that particular connection. So, this plan also shows a couple of areas here, hatched green, where the road width will be wide enough for 2 HGVs to pass. Now, the developer's architects will provide some comments on the proposals, and officers are particularly seeking comment from members in the context of the 3 main issues that were raised by the planning inspector. They are the effect of the proposals on the local highway network, connectivity of the site, and whether the proposal will preserve the significance of the listed building. There is also that issue of the additional building being demolished, which is listed by virtue of it being a curtilage building. Thank you, Chair.
Still a busy site. Papering over the cracks. Somebody has been down Washpit New Road trying to make it look wider, that road. It's no wider now than 20 years ago. Although they scratched about trying to make it look wider. It isn't our highways department, so somebody's been messing about there. I don't know if they've had permission or not. Whether our highways have given them permission, I have no idea. But they've wound the local people up. And as I said, as it stands just at this moment in time, there's not much difference to what it was before. There's still going to be a big generation of traffic there. Dunford Road is still bad to get down. Forget Washpit Mills, it's bad to get down today, never mind had all that extra traffic there, and we're just making hard work at job. As far as I'm concerned, it's no different to what it was before, apart from the fact he has dropped a few things out, pulled an odd building down, but added a few other things. And by the way, Rowan Yarns are wanting to put some apartments at the end of Washpit New Road by the mill. They're wanting to put 40-some apartments down there. So I don't think them plans have come through to us yet, but they will be doing. Make no mistake about it. So that'll be another 40-odd down same road. You know, it just goes on and on and on. It certainly don't get my support.
I think I tend to agree with what Councillor Firth has said. It just looks overdeveloped.
Absolutely.
It strikes me the best comparison I can think of to this is Whitley Willows, which is a mill in the middle of nowhere, something like that anyway.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Which I can't remember how many houses it was redeveloped into, and I can't remember to what extent. Well, I think the mill buildings were reused, but it's only housing, as far as I can remember. There's none of this extra stuff here, which has the potential to be much greater traffic generators than plain housing redevelopment. And it just strikes me whether there are any lessons that can be learnt from Whitley Willows in redeveloping this site. Well, I'm sorry, Paul. It's just a good example of a mill that's in a poor location, and here we're in a sense offering to increase the traffic problem.
Oh, absolutely.
And you know that doesn't help. I accept that at Whitley Willows there is a bus that goes round there, whereas I don't think there's any that goes anywhere near this site. But there isn't an easy answer to developing mills that are in awkward locations, particularly if the yeah. Well, precisely the yeah.
I think the only issue with this is that they've really tried to do something with the comments made by the inspector, and I think you would find it extremely hard if we refuse this, because they have tried to do something with it. But that's up to us as a planning committee. Sorry, I
apologies. I introduced that example in all good faith because there are parallels that can be drawn from it. I know the site's not the same. I know there's far more on this site than there ever was at Whitley Willows. But maybe that argues for getting rid of some of it. But I just leave it at that and state the blindingly obvious that it's difficult to redevelop a mill building that's poorly located in the middle of nowhere.
Crap. Oh. Yes, Chair. I have no desire to stop people doing what they want to do. In other words, I'm not against something happening down there, but I am against all the things that they wanting to happen down there on that very narrow road. They've got to do something on a smaller scale. And it's not just the way we think about it that are in Holmfirth, it's the people who live around there. They're going to catch the back end of it as well. They're not happy about it, not even as it is now in its new form. Please, would the people come back with something reasonable something smaller, something we can accept. But if this is accepted today, then there's going to be bother, there will be trouble, and I know we'll get to Oakburn to it, we will. They'll be ringing us, there'll be problems. I'll send them down to Paul. Simple as that, you know. But seriously, no, seriously, if it's been made a bit smaller, they've tried, but they've taken away one thing and added another thing. It's as simple as that. And when you look at it on by and large, it's not a lot different. Not a lot different. Thank you.
To make the point, part of the reason that the appeal was dismissed, part of the reason was there wasn't enough information. Well, there were three issues, but what the inspector said on highways was, I don't have enough information in front of me in technical documents, but of my assessment, I think it is overly intensive or more comings and goings, and therefore I think there is an impact. They have reduced the intensity of the development. It is a reduction. I accept they're doing a bit of pushing and pulling, but it is a less intense development than you got before. You will get the evidence. We will insist that they provide the transport statements to justify the comings and goings and the assessments. You may decide that some of the impacts off-site need mitigating as part of that, and you might look into that, members. But I think, as Councillor Kane says, we've got a mill here in the middle of nowhere, not quite in the middle of nowhere, but we've got a mill, we've got a listed building. We've got to find a way to find a viable use that works in the context of the comings and goings. It is big, but it's about is it evidence justified? Yeah. There is less activity than what there was at the appeal scheme. Yeah, we need that, and you're right. We need the evidence to support it, but the improvements to that done for to the connection for the footpath. So we will take that away. We will ask the applicant to work at the proof and evidence and the justification. I think they have moved significantly from the appeal scheme. It's about whether that's far enough for the committee and what the residents say when we consult them. But we will pick that up as a separate item as it comes.
Right. So we'll send it back. So let's come back. Just a pre-app, if you can hand your yellow papers in for that viability study. Right. Thanks. It's been a bloody long day. Let's go home.